Chapter 10:14. April 13th, Sea Cloud Mountains. In the early morning, Sea Cloud Mountains were filled with smoke and billowing up and down, making it look like a fairyland. When the sun rose and the thick fog dispersed, the blood-red land at the foot of the mountain was revealed. How was this a fairyland? It was simply hell. Although the corpses of the adventurers were respawned, the blood of the corpses remained. The mottled blood soaked into the soil, spilled on the grass, and splashed on the branches. Overnight, the 200,000 Southern Punitive Army was wiped out, and less than 10% of the survivors survived. This battle became the biggest turning point of the war in Annan Province. Including the 500,000 players still trapped on the mountain road, nearly half of the 1.6 million combat professional players in Annan Province had been cut. With the destruction of the Southern Punitive Army, the fate of the 4th Corps of Coastal Defense City could be imagined. As a result, apart from the 800,000 Imperial Guard stationed in Hanoi who were unscathed, half of the player army and territorial army in Annan Province had been wiped out by Great Xia. What was even more frightening was that the Great Xia army was almost unscathed during this process. The huge disparity almost made the Annan players collapse. When the news of the 200,000 troops being ambushed at the foot of Sea Cloud Mountains and being wiped out reached Hanoi, the entire capital was silent. Depression, fear, grief, and endless negative emotions shrouded the city. After the players calmed down a little, they overwhelmingly blamed the Lord of Coastal Defense City, Yuan Tianke. There were two main points of pain. First, if it weren't for Coastal Defense City's harsh methods in dealing with the Tangshan Chamber of Commerce, perhaps this war wouldn't have happened at all. Second, it was the intelligence provided by Coastal Defense City that caused the 2nd Southern Punitive Army to be ambushed by Great Xia, resulting in the annihilation of the entire army. It could be said that Yuan Tianke was the center of the war. Based on such considerations, the Annan players directly gave up the plan to recover Danang City. It could even be said that the entire southern region was completely abandoned by the Annan players. Half of Annan's territory had fallen. In the next few days, the Annan battlefield suddenly calmed down. In the absence of reinforcements, under the double pressure of the poisonous smoke and food shortage, the fate of the 500,000 players still trapped on the mountain road could be imagined. Some players really didn't want to kill each other for food, so they simply committed suicide. The scene was extremely sad. Mu Guiying's troops stationed in Danang City completed the cover mission and followed them south to encircle and annihilate the 4th Corps of Coastal Defense City. Apart from that, there were no other movements in the entire Annan battlefield. On the contrary, in the China region, the Yanhuang Alliance army had entered the West Chu territory and were fighting with the West Chu army. The situation was in a stalemate, and it was hard to tell who was superior in a short period of time. The Xiang family had produced many fierce generals, and the troops trained by Xiang Yu could be considered elite troops. Adding on the fact that the West Chu army was fighting in their own territory, the strength of the two sides was almost the same. Seeing that Great Xia had already conquered half of Annan in the blink of an eye, Di Chun and the others had no choice but to grit their teeth and mobilize another 200,000 soldiers from their respective territories to enter the battlefield of West Chu. This time, West Chu was in danger. Yanhuang Alliance did not lack famed generals either. Wu Qi, Tian Dan, Lin Pe, all of them were famous figures. Adding on Xie Xian, Hua Xiong, Zhao Zhuang, and a few other talented generals, they could be said to be full of stars. The West Chu War had entered a critical period. Even if it was like this, no one thought that West Chu would be defeated this easily. In history, Xiang Yu was a man that created miracles, and there were countless cases of him winning against many. There was still hope for this battle. Just at this moment, something happened. On the 14th of April, Great Xia's soaring Eagle Army, under the command of General Li Mu, suddenly attacked Liye City's territory and started a war in the southwest. At the same time, Luofeng City's Blazing Flame Army marched towards the east and attacked Azura City's territory. The Northern Borderline Army was active at the border of Zhongwu County and could attack Handan City's territory at any time. In a short period of time, the situation in the China region changed. No one expected that Great Xia would actually start a war at this time. When Yan-Huang alliance was at its weakest, they joined forces with Luofeng City and attempted to take down the entire Guangxi province. This is going to be interesting, because Yan-Huang alliance attacked Great Xia's ally first. Great Xia's retaliation did not put them at a disadvantage. The players did not think that Great Xia could only take a beating and not fight back. If there was anyone who was the main culprit, it would be Yan-Huang alliance. Players with foresight understood that Yan-Huang alliance first took advantage of Ouyang Shua's expedition to Australia to take down Hunan province. Then, they took advantage of Great Xia's attack on Annan province to suddenly attack West Chu. The entire operation was closely linked. It was obviously a huge plan and not an impromptu one. On the surface, it seemed that the Yan-Huang alliance only wanted to unite the territories, but their ultimate goal was to establish a dynasty that could rival the Great Xia dynasty. Especially after Di Chun spent a lot of money to buy the merit emblem. At the global auction, Yan-Huang alliance's ambition to establish a dynasty was clear. Faced with such a situation, Great Xia seemed to have no reaction, but in fact, they were hiding their killing intent. Before the new year, Great Xia first casually annexed Jiangchuan province to balance out the influence of Yan-Huang alliance, taking down Hunan province. At the same time, they pushed the border of both sides to the north. Then, they became even more ruthless. Great Xia could still take a risk and brazenly send troops to attack the Guangxi province when they were attacking the stubborn Annan province. It was foreseeable that once Guangxi province fell, even if Yan-Huang alliance took down West Chu, their overall strength would not increase. It was equivalent to drawing water with a wicker basket. Ruthless and accurate. Someone gave Emperor Xia a thumbs up. When the news of the war came out, Liye City's lord, Wandering Huan, and Shura City's lord, Military Killer, panicked. Both of their territories originally only had 150,000 soldiers. After the war with West Chu, there were only 80,000 regular soldiers guarding their territories. Whether it was against Great Xia's Eagle Army or Luofeng City's Flame Army, they were powerless. Even if they wanted to recall the West Chu troops, it was too late. These troops had already penetrated deep into West Chu territory and were entangled with the West Chu army. If they withdrew their troops now, not only would they not be able to make it in time, it could also lead to the collapse of Yan-Huang alliance's hard-earned advantage. If they were not careful, it could completely collapse. Therefore, no matter what, Di Chun and the others would not allow Shura City and Loye City to withdraw their troops at this time. Without the consent of Di Chun and the others, there was no teleportation formation. Wandering Huan and Military Killer could not withdraw even if they wanted to. They could only watch helplessly. In desperation, Wandering Huan applied for protection from the Tang dynasty, and Military Killer applied for protection from the Qin Empire. They hoped to use the power of the two dynasties to escape this disaster. The reply of the two dynasties directly sent the two into the cold abyss. Rejected. The opinions of the Tang dynasty and the Qin Empire were surprisingly consistent. The envoys of the two territories did not even get to see the faces of the two emperors before they were chased out of Wangsheng. Conspiracy. This is a huge conspiracy. Military Killer was close to going crazy. Wandering Huan was fine. He was just a commoner player. It was only because he was close to Xiongba that he was able to enter Yan-Huang alliance. He was lucky enough to survive in the fierce competition in the wilderness until now. Even if he failed, Wandering Huan had no regrets. Military Killer was different. Shura City was not only a territory, it was also the foundation of Military Killer's family. If it fell, the consequences would be catastrophic. Even if the Feng family fell in Swordsman City, the consequences would not be so serious. After all, the Feng family was an ancient martial arts family. Even if they lost their territory, they could still do well in the game. Military Killer's family had no way out. At this crucial moment, Di Chun displayed the demeanor of a leader of Yan-Huang alliance. He urgently summoned the 5 members to Handan City to discuss how to solve the current crisis. The 6 of them discussed, and there was only one solution. With the military strength of Yan-Huang alliance, they could either abandon West Chu and protect Lia City and Shura City, or they could abandon these two territories and concentrate their forces to take down West Chu. It was impossible to take care of both sides. How could they choose? Di Chun, Lord Chunshin, and Battle Wolves naturally fully supported taking down West Chu. Yan-Huang alliance had worked hard for so long. Wasn't it for the success of Plan Z? Taking down West Chu was the most important part of Plan Z. As such, how could they give up halfway? From an emotional point of view, Xiongba naturally did not want to abandon Wandering Huan's Luoye City. From a personal point of view, the existence of Luoye City was also a strong support for Xiongba. But Xiongba was a true hero. A so-called hero had to know when to give up. Compared to protecting Luoye City, the implementation of Plan Z was the most important thing. After thinking about it, not only did Xiongba support the attack on West Chu, he also personally came forward to help Wandering Huan. Wandering Huan's existence depended on Xiongba's family. While he had a foothold in the wilderness, he had also lost his independence. Since Xiongba, the main family, personally came forward to persuade him, Wandering Huan could only choose to accept. As the only remaining commoner lord in China, other than Ouyang Shao, Wandering Huan was able to get to where he was today. Although it seemed like luck, he had his own ways. Wandering Huan's way was to go with the flow. Since Yan-Huang alliance could not reverse the situation in Guangxi province, Wandering Huan naturally would not go against the flow. Not only would it not benefit him, it would also cut off his relationship with Xiongba. On the contrary, choosing to agree was equivalent to giving Xiongba a lot of face. As a descendant of a large family, Xiongba would definitely compensate Wandering Huan and would not ignore him. This was where Wandering Huan's intelligence came from. In the end, everyone's eyes were on military kill Ripper. This representative of the gray area, from the initial anticipation to the struggle to the current despair, his mood could be said to be ups and downs. Now all that was left was dispiritedness and depression. That was the disappointment after one's ambition was destroyed. It was the paleness of one's future. Seeing Army kill Ripper in such a state, Di Chun and the others also had a heavy heart. Although Army kill Ripper's popularity in the Yan-Huang alliance was extremely poor, but seeing him reach this point, they still felt a little sad. The pain that Ouyang Shao brought to Yan-Huang alliance was really too deep. Seeing this, Di Chun did not wait for military kill Ripper to speak. He suddenly said, "Everyone, I have a suggestion." Chapter 10:15. What proposal? Di Chun said, "It is indeed a bit difficult to make Wandering Huan and Army Killer give up their territories for no reason. The alliance should compensate them. My proposal is that after we take over West Chu, we promise them the governorships. One will be in charge of Wan'an province and the other of Ludong province. What do you think?" Lord Chunshin and the others looked at Di Chun in surprise. According to Plan Z, the governorships of the two provinces were important bargaining chips. They did not expect Di Chun to give them away so easily. Are you trying to buy people's hearts, or do you have other motives? Lord Chunshin was confused. Xiongba was very appreciative. He nodded and said, "I think this is a good proposal. Let's just let Wandering Huan be the governor of Wan'an and Army Killer be the governor of Ludong." Di Chen's eyes narrowed. He seemed to see through Xiongba's thoughts and did not object. The internal structure of the alliance was complicated. It was not easy to be a good leader. Most of the time, Di Chun had to compromise. Seeing that Lord Chunshin and Warwolf did not object, Di Chun did not beat around the bush and said, "Then it is decided. The frontline war is urgent. We cannot delay it any longer." Good. At this point, the Yellow Emperor Alliance resolved a big crisis by cutting off one of their own. After the meeting, Army Killer and Wandering Huan returned to their respective territories and quickly got busy. Since they had decided to give up their territories, they naturally would not let Great Xia and Luo Feng City take advantage of them. They took everything that they could and burned everything that they could not. Money, equipment, civil officials, generals, high-level talents, troops, etc. were all taken away through the teleportation formation. These were what they relied on to establish a foothold in the province in the future. Rations, household accounts, and documents were all burned to disgust the enemy. In just 2 days before Soaring Eagle Army and Blazing Flame Army reached the main city, Luo Feng City and Azura City had finished their evacuation and fled. At this point, the number of lords in the China region was reduced again. There were only 6 lords left. With the 160,000 soldiers led by Army Killer and Wandering Huan, the War of West Shu could no longer be reversed. Even if Xiang Yu was brave and fierce, and the Xiang family army was like wolves and tigers, they still had to kneel in front of the 760,000 soldiers. The fall of West Shu was only a matter of time. On the 18th day of the 4th month, the Soaring Eagle Army entered Lia City and the Blazing Flame Army entered Azura City, announcing the change of ownership of Guangxi Province. The League of Mountains and Seas had bitten off a fat piece of meat from the Yanhuang League without sacrificing a single soldier. Ouyang Shua's ability to flip clouds and rain with a flip of his hand was simply too shocking. What confused the players was why Great Qin and Great Tang hadn't gotten involved in this battle. Even if the two dynasties had always been on good terms with the Great Xia dynasty, they shouldn't be indifferent. There must be more to it than meets the eye. The following plot made the players realize what was going on, but at the same time, their jaws dropped. On the day that they took down the 2 main cities, Great Xia chose to unconditionally transfer the territory of Liye City to the Great Tang dynasty, while Luofeng City chose to unconditionally transfer the territory of Azura City to the Great Qin Empire. It was equivalent to saying that Ouyang Shua and Feng Xiuhuang had given away the fat meat in their hands. How strange! Great Xia was wealthy and had a vast territory. Giving away 2 counties might not be a big deal, but the problem was, why was Fallen Phoenix City, which only had 1 province, so generous this time? The players were puzzled. There were all sorts of speculations on the forum. There were conspiracy theories, theories of idiots, and even theories of romance. If they were to be sorted out, they would probably be able to make a big drama. The truth of the matter was actually very simple, and it wasn't as complicated as the outside world thought. There were 3 main reasons why Ouyang Shua and Feng Xiuhuang made this move. Firstly, if they hadn't appeased Great Tang and Great Qin in advance, the Battle of Guanxi might not have taken place. Without the previously signed letter of credence, Great Qin and Great Tang had no reason not to accept Azura City and Luoye City's request for protection. Regardless of whether it was Emperor Qin or Emperor Taizong of Tang, they were both unparalleled heroes, and they definitely wouldn't be swayed by emotions. Once the 2 dynasties got involved, with the military strength that Great Xia could mobilize, they might not be able to take down the Guangxi province. If they really fell into the quagmire of war, Great Xia might not even be able to escape unscathed. If that happened, it would only be self-defeating, and Luoye City and Azura City would be sent to the camps of the 2 dynasties. If that really happened, Great Xia would still be able to hold on, but Luoye City would have a hard time. They wouldn't be able to snatch food from Great Qin's mouth, and it would also worsen their relationship. Adding on Mongolia to the north, Handan City to the east, and the Great Han Dynasty to the south, Luoye City would be in an awkward situation of being surrounded by enemies on all sides. Unless Great Xia lent a hand, Luoye City would be doomed in the future. Given Feng Xiuhuang's personality, how would she be willing to join Great Xia just like that? This was a knot that was almost impossible to untie. Secondly, there was a huge uncertainty in Royal City. There were already 3 Royal City in Great Xia, and they had become a thorn in Ouyang Shua's heart. Fortunately, be it Dali, Qingdu, or even Great Sui, they weren't too strong of an opponent. With Great Xia's foundation, Ouyang Shua could still hold on. But who were the 2 lords entrenched in Guanxi? One was the ancient Emperor Qin, and the other was the Heaven Khan Emperor Taizong of Tang. Neither of them were lords that could be trifled with, not to mention that there were 2 of them in a province. Over the past 2 years, Gaia had loosened the bindings on the royal city time and time again. Who could guarantee that Gaia wouldn't give the royal city greater autonomy in the future? Ouyang Shuo didn't dare to take this risk, and Feng Xiuhuang even more so. Under the situation where they couldn't destroy the royal city, the best solution was to form an iron-blooded alliance with them. Thirdly, the threat from Mongolia. As the biggest foreign power in China, the strength of the Mongolian tribes was simply too shocking. Not to mention that Luoyes City couldn't do anything alone. Even Great Xia would have to think twice before going against the Mongolians. Since that was the case, it was only natural for them to find someone to shoulder the burden with them. The Great Qin Empire was directly connected to the Mongolians, and they had 1,000,000 soldiers. They really didn't fear the Mongolian tribes, and forming an alliance with the Great Qin Empire was a very worthwhile deal. Based on the above considerations, Ouyang Shuo decisively took a step back under Zhang Liang's advice. This step back was a whole new world to him. Great Xia and Luoyes City signed a non-aggression pact with Great Qin and Great Tang respectively, stabilizing the border and gaining 2 reliable allies. As for whether Great Qin would go to war with Great Tang in the future, it wasn't within Ouyang Shuo's consideration. With Gaia's recognition of the pact, Luoyes City completely removed the threat from the west. In the future, they could also borrow the power of the Great Qin Empire to fight against the Mongolians, and the surrounding security situation was greatly improved. Apart from that, Ouyang Shuo also used this opportunity to cut off one of the Yin-Huang Alliance's arms, greatly reducing the Yin-Huang Alliance's operations in West Chu. It was truly worthwhile. Furthermore, he had done Great Qin and Great Tang a huge favor, and Great Xia and Luoyes City had also returned the favor. Ouyang Shuo received the help of Great Tang's god of war, Li Jing, while Feng Xiuhuang received the Meng Yi and Meng Tian brothers. 19th of April, Shanghai City. The day after Great Xia transferred the territory of Luoyes City, Li Jing brought his family to Shanghai City according to the agreement and joined Ouyang Shuo. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he personally went to the palace entrance to welcome them. Li Jing, who appeared in the wilderness, was already in his 50s, but his spirit was strong and his posture was tall and straight. Although his face was a little dull, he was wise, and no one dared to look down on him. Speaking of Li Jing, the most legendary story among the people was the investiture of the gods, in which Li Jing turned into the pagoda-bearing heavenly king and became a legendary figure. In fact, this rare all-rounder who could become a general and a minister was already a glory in life in the Tang dynasty. It was said that after Li Jing's death, he often appeared to save the people from danger. As a result, the people built temples to worship him. In the late Tang dynasty, Li Jing was gradually deified. From this, it could be seen how famous this great Tang's god of war was. General Li Jing pays his respects to the king. Li Jing was a person who paid great attention to rules. Since he had joined Great Xia according to the agreement, he did not think twice and paid his respects to his new master. Of course, to Li Jing, it was not a bad thing to serve under Ouyang Shuo. Name: Li Jing, God level. Title: God of War Dynasty. Tang Dynasty Identity: Great Xia General. Occupation: Special Class General. Loyalty: 75 points. Commander-in-Chief: 97 Martial Power, 85 Intelligence, 82 Politics, 78 Specialties. God of War: Increased troop morale by 40, increased troop movement speed by 30, increased troop defense by 25, increased troop lethality by 20. Works: The Art of War Evaluation. A famous general in the early Tang dynasty, Li Jing was the best. Jing entered the Eastern Turkic Khaganate. Jili was captured, Tuhun was attacked, Fu Yun died. His military service was outstanding, his banner was always bright although there were no generals to praise him. He was able to dispatch his troops well. After all, he was a commander-in-chief. Wei Gonggu was an outstanding man. General, please rise. Ouyang Shuo looked happy. I have been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. Today, I have fulfilled my wish. It's great. Li Jing felt relieved when he saw that. Seeing that the king thought so highly of him, his military career in Great Xia would not be lonely. This is not a place to talk. General, please come to the study to talk. Ouyang Shuo smiled and personally led Li Jing to the imperial study. He wanted to have a good chat with the great Tang's god of war. Li Jing did not dare to delay and quickly followed. Although he was almost 50 years old, he was agile. The two of them chatted for a full 2 hours. When the ministers in the court heard the news, they could not help but be envious. It was already a great honor to be able to chat with the king for an hour in the imperial study. From this, it could be seen how much the king valued Li Jing. As expected, in the afternoon, Li Jing's appointment edict was sent out. The edict said, Li Jing is appointed as the commander of the Flying Bear Army. He will go to the Grand Council and receive the rank of general. The moment the edict was issued, the civil and military officials gasped. The first 2 items were nothing, but the last one was the rank of general. Before this, Bai Qi was the only general in the entire dynasty. Han Xian, Sun Bin, Hua Xiubing, and Li Mu were all second-class generals. The commander of the city guards, Shi Wan Sui, was only a second-grade general. No one expected that Li Jing would be on equal footing with Bai Qi and become the top figure in the Great Xia army. The king's love for Li Jing was really enviable. Chapter 10:16. Li Jing did not immediately take up his post. The Annan War had entered a critical period. The Flying Bear Army was commanded by Bai Qi. It would not be good for Li Jing to intervene midway. It would be better to wait until the Annan War ended before heading to the Flying Bear Army. Li Jing did not stay in Shanghai City for long. Since the king thought so highly of him, Li Jing had no way to repay him. He could only prove to the Great Xia army that he was worthy of the title of Great General. In history, Li Jing had vanquished the Eastern Turks in the north and the Tuyuan in the west. Whether it was on the steppe or on the highlands, he had never been a problem for this great Tang war god. Li Jing and Li Mu's two-Li combination would be the Great Xia's main force in resisting the Tubo, Western Xia, Western Turkic Khaganate, and Mongolian tribes. Ouyang Shuo had already told Li Jing that after the Battle of Annan ended, the Flying Bear Army would move from the current Jiangchuan province to the Chang County in Shu and be in charge of resisting the Tubo. Li Jing left Mountain Sea City and headed to Chang County to investigate the Tubo Kingdom. In the imperial study of the Xia Palace, Ouyang Shuo had just sent Li Jing off when he summoned Zhang Yi and the commander of the Mountain Sea Guards, Shen Buhai, to give them a secret mission. That night, the magic-powered submarine Black Shark, docked at North Sea Harbor, quietly left the harbor and disappeared into the vast ocean. A high-ranking official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies also left with the Black Shark. Gaia Year 5, April 20th, Annan District. A few days ago, the China region was in turmoil, and there was a drama of internal strife. The Annan District was not really calm. After adjustment, the entire Annan District had entered the stage of attack. The final fate of the 500,000 Annan soldiers who were trapped on the mountain path was self-evident. Under the joint efforts of Hua Xiubing and Mu Ging, the 4th Army of Coastal Defense City was completely defeated. The entire southern part of Annan was officially under the rule of Great Xia. After the battle, the two armies did not stay in the south for long. Apart from leaving behind a troop to guard the south and take care of the prisoners of war while they were at it, the majority of the troops took advantage of the merchant ships and bypassed Mount Ocean Cloud. They appeared in the north of Annan and met up with Ma Chao's troops. After the two armies met, they continued north, sweeping through everything along the way. At the same time, the 3 City Guard Corps led by Shi Wan Sui also moved frequently, speeding up the mopping up of the northern border of Annan. The momentum was very fierce. Sea Defense City was not peaceful either. Recently, the Royal Fleet had joined hands with the first formation of the Pacific Fleet to bombard Coastal Defense City in turns. As the main city, the defense level of Coastal Defense City was much higher than that of Da Nang City. Although they were both coastal cities, Coastal Defense City had more than 200 cannons installed on the city walls. That was terrifying. Very few fleets could withstand a volley of attacks. Even the Royal Fleet, one of the top fleets in the world, had suffered a series of setbacks and suffered heavy losses in the face of the perverted defense of Sea Defense City. They had to take turns with the first formation of the Pacific Fleet. When the Cliff Mountain Fleet finished their mission, they would gather in Sea Defense City. By that time, even if Haiphong City was a steel city, it would still be blasted into pieces. Before that, the royal fleet could only cover the 1st Legion and the 3rd Legion of the Imperial Guards to land and set up camp 15 miles south of Coastal Defense City, ready to attack Coastal Defense City at any time. This meant that the Great Xia soldiers would be divided into 3 groups and advance together. From the looks of it, it seemed as though they were prepared to sweep through everything in their path. They were prepared to rendezvous at the royal capital and complete the final blow. At this time, there was internal strife in Annan. It was really fatal. The accusations of the adventurer players against the Lord of Coastal Defense City, Ruan Tianke, were overwhelming, and it was getting more and more intense. If it weren't for Ruan Tiang's strong mentality, he would have already committed suicide to apologize. But Ruan Tianke couldn't die. Because of the estrangement, the Annan players were unwilling to reinforce Coastal Defense City. With the 160,000 troops stationed in Coastal Defense City, when the Great Xia's Cliff Mountain fleet arrived to reinforce, it was absolutely impossible to stop the attack of the 2 Imperial Guard legions. Once Coastal Defense City fell, the Annan players would lose most of their lives. For this reason, Ruan Tianke was burning with anxiety. In desperation, he could only personally rush to Hanoi, visit the leaders of the guild one by one, and clarify the stakes to them. As the only main city of Annan's territory, Coastal Defense City was not only a corner of Hanoi, but also an outpost to guard the estuary of the Red River. Once Coastal Defense City fell, the Great Xia fleet could go upstream through the Red River, directly come to the outside of Hanoi, and launch an overwhelming bombardment on the royal capital. The consequences would be disastrous. In addition, once Coastal Defense City fell, the entire territory of Annan, except for the royal capital, would be declared to have fallen. The cities under Coastal Defense City would lose the will to resist and would be trampled by the Great Xia army. In that case, Hanoi would soon become an isolated city. Once the situation developed to this point, it was only a matter of time before Annan was destroyed. Even if Hanoi had 800,000 Imperial Guards and 900,000 combat professional players, it was still a bird in a cage. Ruan Tianke reminded the guild leaders, "Don't forget how Great Xia took down Rabat, the capital of Morocco. With just a fire, Rabat was turned into ashes. So, do you really think that you can win this war by defending Hanoi?" Ruan Tianke questioned. The guild leaders were speechless and even quietly shuddered. They believed that Great Xia would definitely be able to use such a method again. More than that, Ruan Tianke went on to say, as a territory, Coastal Defense City has allies in ASEAN who can reinforce Coastal Defense City at critical moments. But now that a part of Coastal Defense City has fallen, they can't do anything even if they want to. At present, Annan had not shown any signs of defeat. In the case of unclear situation, Southern Palm, Zhenla, and other allies would not rush to reinforce Coastal Defense City. After all, the threat of Great Xia was everywhere, and they did not dare to act rashly. Even if there were reinforcements, it would be limited to their respective territorial armies. When Great Xia did not launch other wars, neither the Southern Palm players nor the Zhenla players would selflessly come to Annan as reinforcements. Moreover, Great Xia never stopped diplomatic activities during the war. During this time, Great Xia arranged for the Indian Ocean Fleet and the Pacific Fleet to patrol the ASEAN waters, eyeing them covetously. At the same time, they sent many envoys to the ASEAN countries. Emperor Xia declared, "The war between Great Xia and Annan is just a local conflict caused by trade. Great Xia has no intention of going against ASEAN, and it will not easily expand the war." In order to enhance its persuasiveness, Great Xia was even willing to sign a non-aggression pact with the 4 members of the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership Agreement, Johor, Thailand, Siam, and Payu. As soon as the news came out, the 4 countries of Johor were immediately moved. On one hand, they accelerated the war in Annan, and on the other hand, they played the diplomatic card. Great Xia's combination of punches seemed dazzling, but in fact, it cut off Annan's foreign aid. Under such circumstances, Annan should be more united internally. Ruan Tianke was the one who saw through it the most. He did not even want to defend himself, saying that Great Xia's so-called defense of free trade was simply a pretense. Instead, he simply admitted his mistake. Yuan Tianke took the blame. Brothers, I admit that I am guilty. After this war, regardless of success or failure, I will apologize with my death and will never tarnish the glory of Annan. But before the end of the war, please temporarily put down your hostility to Coastal Defense City, unite together, fight against the strong enemy, and protect the country. Please, for the survival of the country, please believe me again. Speaking of emotion, Yuan Tianke almost knelt down. In this way, Yuan Tianke visited one by one, mobilized again and again, promised again and again, and finally knocked on the door of the various guilds with sincerity. More than a dozen guild leaders once again gathered around Yuan Tianke to discuss the plan. What should we do? The Great Xia army attacked from 3 directions and put on an aggressive posture, which was really daunting. Yuan Tianke was full of confidence. Everyone, the current situation is far from as bad as you think. The Great Xia army divided into 3 directions, which seems aggressive, but in fact, it has violated a military taboo. What do you mean? Yuan Tianke spoke with fervor and assurance. It's very simple. The 3 armies of Great Xia add up to only 7 legions, which is less than 500,000 troops. Although we have lost the southern region, the 800,000 Imperial Guards have not been dispatched yet. There are still 160,000 elites in Coastal Defense City, not to mention the 900,000 troops led by everyone present. In terms of military strength, we have completely crushed Great Xia. Speaking of this, Yuan Tianke's mouth flashed with a hint of playfulness. Great Xia is too arrogant this time. They dare to declare war on us with only 500,000 troops. It's really arrogant. Even so, the other party still dared to divide into 3 directions. Isn't it clear that they want us to break through all the way? I can only say that Great Xia has been blinded by victory. Yuan Tianke's analysis resonated with everyone present. There were also people who questioned something is wrong. It is said that Great Xia has more than 2 million troops. Why did they only deploy 500,000 troops for this expedition? This is completely unlike the style of Great Xia. No one would think that Great Xia was really stupid. Another guild leader said, I heard that Great Xia has just defeated their sworn enemy, the Yin Huang Alliance in the country. They didn't mobilize the army before because their main force was held back by this matter. After hearing this, the others were bewildered and looked at each other. The guild leader who spoke at the beginning said cautiously, now that the war in Great Xia is over, does that mean that another army is about to set off for Annan province? That's about right. Everyone's mood became heavy all of a sudden. Only Yuan Tianke was still in high spirits and said loudly, I say, everyone, this is our opportunity. What do you mean? It will take at least a week for the second army of Great Xia to rush to Annan province. As long as we defeat the 3 armies of Great Xia within this week, even if the reinforcements of Great Xia arrive, they will be powerless to reverse the situation. That's right. The eyes of the guild leaders lit up, swept away the haze from before, and looked at Yuan Tianke with admiration in their eyes. In this way, Yuan Tianke once again won back the trust of the guild leaders. The leaders cupped their fists and said, Brother Yuan, please tell us how to do it. Chapter 1017. This is what I plan to do. In a meeting hall, Yuan Tianke began to elaborate his battle plan. There was only 1 week left for Annan. If they wanted to break the 3 attacks of Great Xia, they had to take the initiative to attack and have a head-on battle with Great Xia. In addition to mobilizing 900,000 combat professional players, they also had to rely on the power of the Imperial Guards. Yuan Tianke analyzed, with the combat power of the Great Xia army, we have to deploy at least 3 times the number of troops if we want to win. After the discussion, the deployment of the 3 armies was as follows. In the south, 200,000 Imperial Guards and 200,000 combat players would fight against the 2nd Legion of the Great Xia Imperial Guards and the 2nd Legion of the City Guards. In the east, 200,000 Imperial Guards and 200,000 combat players would fight against the 1st and 3rd legions of the Great Xia Imperial Guards. The 160,000 soldiers in Haiphong City were mainly used to resist the naval attack of Great Xia. In the north, 200,000 Imperial Guards and 400,000 combat players would fight against the 1st, 3rd, and 5th legions of the Great Xia Imperial Guards. After the arrangements were made, there were only 200,000 Imperial Guards and 100,000 combat players left in the capital river. Yuan Tianke was full of confidence. As long as the three armies are stable, the capital is located at the rear and can naturally sit back and relax. Hence, there is no need to leave too many troops to guard. The matter was thus settled. On April 22nd, Annan's counterattack officially began. 600,000 Imperial Guards and 800,000 combat players walked out of the capital river, divided into 3 groups, and took the initiative to fight against the 3 armies of Great Xia. They were determined to annihilate the enemy in one fell swoop. Before leaving, the Annan players held a grand oath ceremony at the city gate. If we don't destroy the enemy, we will not return home. The sound of the oath was like a tsunami, resounding through the sky and shaking the entire land of Annan. This was the will of a nation. After receiving the news of Annan taking the initiative to attack, Great Xia immediately adjusted its combat strategy. The Northern Army and Southern Army stopped attacking the city and turned to garrison, waiting for the arrival of the Annan counterattack army. For Great Xia, this was a bitter battle. Both Hua Xiubing and Shi Wansui were unwilling to increase losses before the war, so they chose to conserve their strength. At the same time, the 3 armies of Great Xia began to strengthen the construction of their stations and gather as much food as possible to make the most comprehensive preparation for the upcoming war. When the Annan side received the news, they naturally had a different interpretation. Great Xia is afraid. For a time, the crowd was excited and their morale was greatly boosted, and the gloominess from before was swept away. The 3 armies unwittingly sped up, eager to engage the enemy as soon as possible. The first collision occurred in the north. On the afternoon of the 25th, Annan's 600,000 troops arrived at Shuangguang City. 10 kilometers north of Shuangguang City was the encampment of Great Xia's Northern Army, Pingxiang City. The 2 sides each occupied a small city and confronted each other. The Annan army naturally didn't think so. After resting for a night, they immediately left the city and took the initiative to launch an attack on Pingxiang City. It was as if Mount Tai was bearing down on them. Unfortunately, they still underestimated the elites of Great Xia. In accordance with the unified deployment of the command center, Shi Wansui defended the city instead of attacking. No matter how the Annan side chose or how harsh their words were, he remained unmoved. If Annan wants to fight, then let's attack the city. The price of attacking the city was too high. Annan was not stupid and would not be fooled. Thus, the battle on the first day ended anticlimactic. On the 27th, the Annan army could no longer sit still because news had just come from Hanoi that another group of merchant ships had left the North Sea port and were heading towards Annan. Without a doubt, this was the second batch of Great Xia's expeditionary army. There was not much time left for Annan. There was no other choice but to attack. With the determination to succeed or die trying, the 600,000 troops surrounded Pingxiang City and launched a fierce attack as soon as they arrived. The foot of the city walls were densely packed with Annan soldiers. If every Annan soldier had a pair of good teeth, they would probably be able to eat Pingxiang City alive. Annan's fierce attack was like a violent storm, powerful and heavy. It was like stormy waves, continuous and endless, wave after wave, from morning to night, without any intention of stopping. When an army went berserk, it was a very terrifying thing. Even the elite city guards suffered heavy casualties under such a perverted and ferocious attack. Fortunately, there were 210,000 city guards, and it was not that easy to break through. Both sides had no way out, so the war naturally became cruel. Pingxiang City was like a huge blender that involved the soldiers of both sides and crushed them into pieces. Each of them was badly mutilated and blood flowed like a river. The khaki city walls were dyed bright red within a day. Are these guys crazy? Even someone as brave as Shi Wan Sui had never seen such a scene. The opponents of the city guards this time were really different from ordinary people. Each of them disregarded life and death and only cared about killing the enemy. An Anin soldier rushed to the top of the city wall. When he saw that he was about to be stabbed to death by the city guards, he actually pounced on a city guard soldier and jumped off the city wall calmly, perishing together with the enemy. The eyes of the mutants who were captured were also bloodshot. They climbed up the city wall in different ways and galloped unhindered in the enemy's formation. They were not afraid of death and even deliberately rushed into the crowd just to kill a few more enemies. They never thought of going back alive. There was only the enemy in their eyes. Kill, kill, kill. The killing intent condensed by the 600,000 soldiers materialized and formed a huge blood-red cloud. It covered the sky above Pingxiang City and kept churning up and down. As the war went on, the red cloud became bigger and thicker. The color also changed from light red to light red, then red, and finally to a dazzling deep red. The red was oppressive and bewitching. Under the stimulation of the blood-red cloud, the Anin army became crazier. Every one of their eyes was bloodshot, and some soldiers even went berserk and turned into bloodthirsty demons. The war was getting more and more intense, and no one could stop it. Such an enemy was really frightening. Shi Wan Sui had no choice but to personally go to the front line and display his heroic spirit to cheer for the city guards. This was the only way to maintain the morale of the city guards. But after a day, more than 20,000 city guards died in battle. It was very rare for the Great Xia army to suffer such a large number of casualties in such a short period of time. The price paid by the Anin army was nearly 80,000 deaths. The corpses piled up at the foot of the city wall, completely blocking the moat, and it was horrifying. After the system update, the corpses of the NPCs wouldn't be refreshed. These corpses piled up at the foot of the city wall and became a great help for the subsequent siege army. They stepped on the mountain of corpses of their compatriots and enemies and launched an even more fierce attack on the city guards. Regardless of whether it was the Anin Imperial Guards or the combat players, they had all turned into ferocious ghosts and lost their humanity. It wasn't until nightfall, when they could no longer see each other, that the Anin army woke up and retreated to the camp like a tide. Retreating was just an expedient measure. The Anin soldiers shouted, "We'll fight again tomorrow. We won't rest until we die." Chapter 1018. The Battle of Pingxiang City was just a microcosm of Anin's counterattack. In addition to Pingxiang City, Haifeng City in the east and Kueha City in the south also launched similar offensive and defensive battles in the next few days. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. Blood flowed like rivers on the three battlefields. These were the three bloodiest battles since the start of the war in Anin. The heart-wrenching battle not only made the players in Anin nervous, but also aroused discussions among the players in the China region. The players in the China region had been paying attention to the war in Anin and were quite puzzled by Great Xia's performance in this war. To put it bluntly, apart from Great Xia's action of sealing the mountains at the beginning, the subsequent arrangements were too mediocre. It could even be said that they made a series of stupid moves. The players in the China region couldn't understand. The Yanwang Alliance's attack on West Chu didn't involve too much of Great Xia's energy. Great Xia's soaring eagle army merely walked around the Guangxi province and couldn't be considered a war at all. That being the case, why did Great Xia divide the expeditionary army into two batches and send them to Anin? Why did they order the first batch of expeditionary army to start a war in Anin before the reinforcements were ready? Why did they infuriate the entire Anin and trigger the retaliation of Anin? There were too many doubtful points in this war. It's completely unlike Great Xia's combat style. Someone gave this a definition of this war. The players had their doubts about the commander of the Great Xia Expeditionary Army, Bai Qi. They felt that this god of war of Great Xia was a little too arrogant. He had failed to live up to Ouyang Shua's expectations and had screwed up a life-and-death battle. Some people even associated it with Ouyang Shua's appointment of the newcomer Li Jing as general a few days ago. Does this mean that Ouyang Shua is already dissatisfied with Bai Qi and is issuing a warning? In addition to doubts about Bai Qi, they were also deeply worried about Great Xia and the war in Annan. All of a sudden, there were all sorts of people and discussions on the forum. There was no lack of people who mocked and ridiculed Great Xia. They felt that Great Xia was finally going to taste the bitter fruit. This is the result of being militaristic. Someone ridiculed Great Xia. Di Chun and the others were also secretly pleased. Although they were not as silly as before, jumping out to make sarcastic remarks about Great Xia, they were still very proud of themselves when chatting with their confidants in private. At the critical moment of attacking West Chu, Di Chin's hatred for Ouyang Shua had reached a new peak. There was no longer any room for reconciliation between the two of them. What was even more detestable was that the Great Xia dynasty's attack, which had been planned by Di Chun and his people for several months, had been wasted. Even Plan Z was implicated, and its effects were greatly reduced. How could Di Chun not hate Ouyang Shua? How could Di Chun not rejoice in Great Xia's misfortune when he saw Great Xia suffering a setback in the Annan region? He couldn't wait for Great Xia's 500,000 expeditionary troops to be buried in the Annan region. God has eyes, Di Chun said. Apart from Di Chun, there was another group of people who were inwardly overjoyed, which were the Japanese players. They knew that Great Xia would be a great opponent in the future, so they naturally paid close attention to the Annan region battle. Seeing that Great Xia was in a disadvantageous situation, Keisuke Honda's anxiety was lifted. This is what they mean by the evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear. The players in the China region couldn't be blamed for discussing this. The Annan region battle not only concerned the interests of Great Xia, but also the interests of the entire China region. It would naturally be best if Great Xia won, as it could add a helping hand to the upcoming national war. However, if Great Xia failed in the Annan region battle and suffered heavy casualties, the consequences would be severe. If they failed in the Annan region battle, not only would Great Xia be unable to stop the rise of the Yin Huang alliance again, but the prospect for the national war in June would also be worrying. Great Xia was already the undisputed pillar of the China region. Once this pillar fell, the problem would be serious. This matter concerned the honor and disgrace of the national war. After all, there were only a few people like Di Chun who rejoiced in Great Xia's misfortune. The worried players in the China region volunteered to join the Great Xia army and assist Great Xia in attacking the Annan region in order to stabilize the situation in the China region. Even big shots like Xie Xiyun and Bloody Romance couldn't sit still. They rushed to Shanghai City to meet Ouyang Shua and express their willingness to help Great Xia in the Annan region battle. Ouyang Shua met them enthusiastically, but he tactfully rejected their good intentions. Little Shua, you don't have to be embarrassed. No one is invincible, and one defeat doesn't mean anything. Snow Rose may not have other things, but we can still gather 100,000 combat players. Lin Jing also rushed to Shanghai City to personally persuade Ouyang Shua. She felt that Ouyang Shua rejected the support of his allies purely because he was a young man who cared about his pride. Ouyang Shua smiled bitterly and shook his head. Aunt, do you think I'm such an ignorant person? Nope. Lin Jing shook her head. If Ouyang Shua was ignorant, he wouldn't have reached his current status. Don't worry, the war in the Annan region is completely under our control. We have been preparing for this war for more than half a year. How can we make those mistakes? Ouyang Shua was naturally aware of the slandering of Great Xia's military strategy on the forum. Then what exactly is going on? Lin Jing was still somewhat worried. Ouyang Shua looked solemn and said seriously, "War isn't child's play, and it's not a confrontation between adventurer players. It's very difficult for outsiders to really see the situation clearly. What they think is a disadvantage is sometimes just a smokescreen." Lin Jing wasn't happy and thought that Ouyang Shua was being perfunctory. Don't try to deceive me. The forum said that nearly 100,000 elite soldiers of Great Xia died in just 3 to 4 days. This can't be false, right? More or less. Ouyang Shua didn't deny it. The actual number of casualties was slightly higher than the statistics on the forum. Honestly speaking, even Ouyang Shua didn't expect that the Annan region would actually have such great lethality when it went crazy. Ouyang Shua felt extremely distressed when he thought of the 100,000 soldiers that died in battle. My heart is bleeding. Other than on the battle map, Great Xia had never suffered such a large number of casualties. Lin Jing glared at him. Then why do you still say that everything is under control? Ouyang Shua felt warmth in his heart. He knew that his aunt was truly concerned about him. He explained, sometimes, for the sake of overall victory, some local sacrifices are also forced. You mean to say that you have long anticipated today's situation? Lin Jing was flabbergasted. I know that there are crouching tigers and hidden dragons in Great Xia, and that the valiant generals and strategists are all first-rate. However, it wasn't this abnormal, right? Ouyang Shua laughed. There were many things in the military that laymen really couldn't understand. It's not that we are magical and have wonderful foresight. That's all a lie. Then why did you say that? Lin Jing was dissatisfied. Not being able to foresight doesn't mean that we can't guide the enemy in the dark. As long as we know how to make use of the general situation and see through the enemy's thoughts and trump cards, they will naturally act according to our expectations. Ouyang Shua explained a little. Is it really that magical? Most likely. Although the details aren't accurate, the general situation is certain. On the surface, it seemed that the Annan region's decision to divide the army into three to suppress the Great Xia army was based on a rational judgment. However, some of the intelligence reports were flaws that Great Xia deliberately revealed. For example, the restlessness of the three armies was precisely to make the Annan region realize that Great Xia wanted to advance side by side through the three armies and then converge in the capital city of Hanha. Another example was the so-called batch of merchant ships leaving the port. They seemed to be carrying the Great Xia Expeditionary Army, but in fact, they were just soldiers stationed on the bow deck. This batch of merchant ships was merely transporting supplies for the army. Their purpose was naturally to lure the Annan region army to take the initiative to attack and completely involve them in the war. All of these arrangements were just preparations for the final contingency plan. Ouyang Shua smiled. Aunt, don't worry. The day after tomorrow at the latest, the Annan region war will usher in a turnaround. By then, all the mysteries will be revealed. Because it was a military secret, it wasn't convenient for Ouyang Shua to reveal too much to his aunt. Lin Jing took a deep look at Ouyang Shua and said, All right, since it's inconvenient for you to elaborate, I won't ask. I'm also looking forward to how Great Xia will amaze the world this time and conveniently give Di Chun and the rest a slap in the face. In the circle of core players, the abnormal performance of Di Chun and the rest was naturally no secret. Ouyang Shua laughed heartily. Don't worry, it will definitely be explosive. Chapter 1019. April 30th, at the northwestern border of Annan. Mungda City was a small northwestern city with a rocky mountain range 5 kilometers north of it. It had already been swept by the Great Xia Northern Army a week ago, along with a few other small cities in the vicinity. Yesterday morning, Mungda City had been placed under martial law. The relay station, the city gate, and the main road were all guarded by the Great Xia city guards to prevent anyone from approaching. The entire city only allowed entry, but not exit. The locals were aware that something big was about to happen, but they didn't dare to send any information to the main city. All possible channels of communication had been cut off by the Great Xia. The Black Snake guards in charge of intelligence in Annan cooperated with the Military Intelligence Department to seal off Mungda City's surroundings. Not even a fly could escape. All signs indicated that something big was about to happen in this small border city far away from the three major battlefields. Just last night, a pitch-black tunnel appeared out of nowhere in the originally desolate and isolated Rocky Mountain range to the north of Mungda City, as though it had been enchanted, leading directly to Yunnan province. Very soon, torches were lit up in the tunnel, illuminating the entire tunnel. At the border of Mengding County in Yunnan Province, the Great Xia Expeditionary Army, which had long been ready, passed through the tunnel and magically appeared in the territory of Annan. From last night until the afternoon of the 30th, the tunnel was packed with people and carriages. The vast army passed through the tunnel in an orderly manner day and night, assembling in the Annan wilderness. This expeditionary army consisted of the 5 corps of the Dragon Stallion Army, the 4th Imperial Guard Corps, the 1st and 2nd Corps of the Flying Bear Army, totaling 720,000 soldiers. The ones that appeared now were only the vanguard troops. There were still more troops coming out of the tunnel. Behind the main troops, there was an even larger auxiliary army of logistics and supplies, numbering 500,000 people. In the evening, the Great Xia Expeditionary Army commander, Bai Qi, was escorted by Lai Huer, Zhang Liao, and a group of other generals as he slowly walked out of the tunnel and officially set foot in the Annan territory. Marshal, the commander of the 1st Corps of the Dragon Stallion Army, Zhao Bonu, was appointed by Bai Qi as the vanguard and led the 1st Corps into the Annan territory. Upon seeing Bai Qi arrive, he immediately came over to greet him. Bai Qi got up, donned in black iron armor, and asked with a solemn expression, "Is the perimeter guarded?" "Don't worry, Marshal. I've already sent out 5 sentry posts. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, including Mengda City, we'll be able to detect the slightest movement." As Hua Zubing's right-hand man in history, Zhao Bonu was adept at tracking and warning, which was why Bai Qi had appointed him as the vanguard. It seemed that he had done a good job. Bai Qi nodded. Naturally, there were no words of praise. Zhao Bonu, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. It was already a great honor to receive the marshal's nod. Be extra vigilant at night. Don't let your guard down, Bai Qi instructed. Yes, sir. Zhao Bonu nodded and went to make arrangements. Bai Qi led a group of generals to the temporary command center to discuss the next military operation. Other than vanguard official Zhao Bonu, Lai He, Zhang Liao, Luo Shixin, Xiao Chavoi, Eli, Chen Tang, and Peirenji were all present. Bai Qi used the triangular eyes unique to the Qin people and silently swept a circle of generals, causing the fierce generals to have goosebumps. Then he said solemnly, "These few days, the enemy's counterattack is swift and fierce, greatly exceeding our expectations before the war. Now the 3 armies are bitterly holding on, and every day there are 20 to 30,000 deaths. The situation is not optimistic." When the generals heard this, their expressions became solemn. Of course, they knew that the sacrifice of the 3 armies was to create an opportunity for them to lure the enemy away from King City so that they could kill them in one fell swoop. "We have to be quick," Bai Qi concluded. "We can't wait any longer. Tomorrow morning, the troops that have already arrived will set off first and try to reach Hanoi within 4 days. "Yes, Marshal," the generals replied in unison. Because the size of the army was too large, Bai Qi had already made arrangements beforehand. The infantry would pass through the tunnel first, with the cavalry 1 step behind. This way, the cavalry that arrived later would be able to catch up and ensure that all the armies would arrive at the outskirts of Hanoi at about the same time. At the same time, in order to reduce the target and at the same time rationally distribute the official roads to avoid traffic jams, even the vanguard troops had to split into several routes and advance side by side before meeting up at the outskirts of Hanoi. As for the specific arrangements, it was up to Bai Qi, the commander-in-chief, to make a unified arrangement. The military meeting only came to an end at 11 o'clock in the evening. As the commander-in-chief, Bai Qi didn't sleep. Instead, he got up, went outside the tent, called the guards, and began to patrol the camps one by one. This war was related to the fate of the dynasty, so Bai Qi had to be cautious. Even in the historical Qin kingdom, Bai Qi had never commanded an army of such a scale. It was hard for outsiders to understand how heavy the burden on his shoulders was. Time quietly entered May. Since the start of the war, the Great Xia army had been fighting in Annan for a month. Seeing that there was only 1 month left before the highly anticipated month of war, the war in Annan became the focus of Asia. Even the ongoing war in West Shu wasn't as eye-catching as this war. at the northwest border of Annan, in the Great Xia Army's encampment. Early in the morning, the sky had just brightened. Bai Qi, who had slept for less than 6 hours, personally led an army, decamped, and rushed toward Hanoi according to the predetermined marching route. From this moment on, the war in Annan ushered in the final battle. In the afternoon of May 2nd, the Great Xia Army broke through the control area of the North Route and officially appeared in the field of vision of Annan. In other words, the early efforts of the North Route, the Black Snake Guards, and the Military Intelligence Division had 1-2 days for the army. This was the key to turning the tide of the war. When a mighty army suddenly appeared near Hanoi, one could imagine what kind of psychological impact it had on the Annan players and the Annan royal family. Oh my God, it's the Great Xia Army. Where did they come from? No one could give an answer. The northwest border was an endless rocky mountain range. Logically speaking, it was impossible for an army to cross such a natural moat and appear in Annan. Annan was almost defenseless against the northwest. However, it happened so unbelievably. No matter how hard the officials and generals of Annan racked their brains, they couldn't figure out what was going on. Didn't they say that the second batch of Great Xia's expeditionary army came by sea? The person who said this had an unpleasant look on his face. Obviously, he had realized that the so-called sea route was just a smokescreen deliberately released by Great Xia to deceive everyone. For a moment, the capital was in chaos, and everyone was in a panic. Someone speculated, perhaps there is a karst cave in the Rocky Mountain range that connects to China's Yunnan province. Some geographers followed suit. According to the speculation of geographical structure and kinematics, it was also possible for such a secret passage to appear in the mountain range. This theory really couldn't stand up to scrutiny. It was already the 5th year of Gaia. If there really was a secret passage, it would have been discovered by the Annan players long ago. How could Great Xia take advantage of it? It was obvious how spacious the secret passage had to be for the Great Xia army to pass through. There is no point in discussing this now. The key question now is, what should we do? Yes, what should we do? The first reaction of the Annan royal family was to immediately order the recall of the 3 imperial guards. In fact, they did do so. Not only the imperial guards, but even the 3 mutant troops were also recalled. After all, heaven and earth are vast, but King City is the largest. Once King City fell, the war would be over, and it would be futile to achieve great results on local battlefields. However, the 3 armies were already far away from King City, and it would take more than 2 or 3 days to rush back. The Annan royal family could only unite with the leader of the Mutant Guild and summon the remaining troops in King City to save themselves. A storm suddenly struck Annan, in the China region. Unlike the Annan players who were panicking, the China players were in a complicated mood. 2 days ago, they were still worried that Great Xia would encounter a Waterloo in Annan. In the blink of an eye, Great Xia was turning the tides in Annan and was about to completely conquer Annan. The speed of the plot reversal was really flabbergasting. The players who ridiculed Great Xia and Bai Qi on the forum became the target of public criticism. They were found and severely humiliated in the game. As long as they weren't too thick-skinned, they wouldn't dare to show their faces on the forum again. Di Chun and the others were even more depressed. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that they were smart enough not to make a statement on the forum. Otherwise, they really didn't know how they would end up. Throughout the whole process, Xia Gong didn't say a word. There was a saying that went, "Invisible pretentiousness is the most fatal." In the eyes of the China players, Xia Gong didn't express his position and didn't respond. Great Xia's tactics are still brilliant. They seem indifferent, but in fact, everything is under control. Brilliant, really brilliant. Many people subconsciously gave a thumbs up. Ordinary players could only worship the layout of Great Xia. This was a realm that they couldn't learn even if they wanted to. As a result, Ouyang Shua ushered in another round of voting for the leaders of the national war. As of the 3rd of May, Ouyang Shua had already obtained 45 million votes, which was 20 million more than Di Chun. The competition for the leaders of the national war had almost ended in advance. The China players were happy, but the Annan players were having a very hard time. Apart from the players who were still in King City, the three armies that went to war received the military order. Their hearts suddenly turned cold, and their faces turned pale. If they still didn't understand what was going on now, they would be unworthy of being called elites. In particular, the Haifeng Lord, Ruan Tianke, learned that the Great Xia army suddenly appeared in the suburbs of Hanoi. At first, he couldn't believe it. Then, his face turned pale and then red. It was a shame that he couldn't show his face. Things were already very obvious. All of this was a trap set by Great Xia. Ironically, Great Xia's trap was able to progress so smoothly because of Ruan Tiang's initiative to mobilize the army of King City. In other words, it was Ruan Tianke who personally buried Annan. Guilt hit Ruan Tianke like a tsunami. At the thought of the upcoming condemnation from his countrymen, Ruan Tianke immediately lost all his courage. Ruan Tianke didn't dare to face those comrades who trusted him. That night, Ruan Tianke committed suicide in the study room. His last words were left on the table. There were only 3 blood-colored words on the snow-white rice paper. I am guilty. Chapter 10:20. The death of Ruan Tianke dropped another heavy bomb on the already restless Annan province and cast a shadow over Haifeng City, which was resisting foreign enemies. The Cliff Mountain fleet of Great Xia had arrived in the nearby waters, and it was unknown how many more days Haifeng City could resist. The Annan players had mixed feelings about the death of Ruan Tianke, but the death of a person was like an extinguished lamp. No words of blame could be said, and they could only grieve for the death of their own kind. The giant ship of Annan had suffered heavy losses and was already riddled with holes. It was about to sink to the bottom of the sea. What was even more ridiculous was that Ruan Tianke apologized with his death, leaving Annan province with no allies to support them. In a sense, it accelerated the destruction of Annan province. Perhaps at the moment of his death, Ruan Tianke no longer cared. Ruan Tianke was dead, but the war had to continue. When the 3 armies of Annan received the news of returning to Shirwang City, they immediately stopped attacking and temporarily returned to the camp, preparing to withdraw overnight. The question was, would Great Xia allow them to withdraw? Take the northern battlefield as an example. As early as 2 days ago, Shi Wansui received news that the second batch of expeditionary troops had assembled in the northwest. Seeing that the enemy was about to withdraw, how could Shi Wansui let it go? If the Annan army withdrew, Shi Wansui would definitely lead his troops to follow behind and nibble at the enemy step by step. As a result, the situation of the Annan army was very awkward. If they insisted on retreating, not only would there be the risk of being chased by the enemy, but even if they returned to Hanoi successfully, the Great Xia army would naturally follow. By then, not to mention entering the city, they would probably be attacked by the 2 armies of Great Xia and buried outside the city. Withdrawal seemed to be an extravagant hope. What should we do? Faced with this dilemma, the commanders of the 3 armies made different choices. Because the northern and eastern armies were closer to Hanoi, they were still prepared to obey the king's order. In any case, they had to return to the capital first. The southern army had just fought with Great Xia for a day. Because of the long journey, they gritted their teeth and advanced instead of retreating, ready to fight to the death with the southern army of Great Xia. On May 4th, Bai Qi led the 280,000 vanguard troops to the suburbs of Hanoi and began to set up camp. In the afternoon, the army launched a tentative attack on Hanoi. Hanoi was garrisoned with 200,000 Imperial Guards and 100,000 combat professional players. In addition, there were more than 2 million professional players and more than 7 million citizens. Their only hope was to hold on until the 3 armies returned. In the evening of the same day, the 560,000 expeditionary troops arrived at Hanoi. Following Bai Qi's arrangements, they surrounded Hanoi so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. A great battle was about to break out. The next morning, the Great Xia army got into action. Bai Qi's strategy was very simple. Although he had surrounded them from all 4 sides, he was only prepared to attack one side. As long as we can break through one of the city gates, Let the cavalry enter the city and destroy the stone steel of Hanoi's city. We will win this battle." As for the specific target, Bai Qi chose the east side. After choosing a hillside in the eastern suburbs as the command center, Bai Qi gazed at the majestic royal city not far away and said, "Who is willing to volunteer to be the vanguard and break through the eastern gate?" "Marshal, this general is willing to go." Right after Bai Qi finished speaking, a general requested to go to battle. It was Chun Tang, the commander of the Flying Bear Army's First Corps. Chun Tang was incorporated into Great Xia along with Jiangchuan Province and was considered a half-surrendered general. As such, he had yet to truly integrate into the Great Xia army and was eager to prove himself on the battlefield. Seeing this, Bai Qi nodded and said, "All right, count the general in." For this attack, Bai Qi was prepared to send 2 corps into battle. It would be best if they were infantry corps. The Flying Bear Army's First Corps, which was led by Chun Tang, was formed from the armies of the various territories in Jiangchuan Province. Their combat strength wasn't a problem, but Bai Qi didn't know how well Chun Tang, the commander of the Flying Bear Army, would integrate them. The Battle of Annan Province would be a touchstone. When Pei Renji saw this, a trace of vexation flashed in his eyes. As a general who had just joined Great Xia, Pei Renji also wanted to make contributions. However, due to a moment of hesitation, Chun Tang snatched the opportunity first. Bai Qi couldn't possibly leave 2 quotas for the Flying Bear Army, so Pei Renji was not fated to participate in this mission. Seeing that the marshal had chosen Chun Tang, the 5 commanders of the Dragon Stallion Army couldn't sit still. After all, they were the marshal's direct subordinates. How could they let an outsider monopolize the limelight? "Marshal, this general is willing to go." Almost at the same time, the 2 valiant generals, Lai Hu and Luo Shixin, requested to go to battle. When Bai Qi saw this, he seemed a little hesitant and didn't know who to choose. Lai Hu and Luo Shixin could only look at the marshal with eyes full of desire. Let the Second Corps go to battle. In the end, Bai Qi still chose to protect his son, not for any other reason than that Luo Shixin was better at cavalry battles. "Thank you, Marshal." Lai Hu's face was flushed with excitement, while Luo Shixin was a little unhappy. Although Lai Hu had been ambushed by Swordsman City in the Battle of Sichuan and had been demoted by the king, he had learned from his mistakes. In the end, this valiant general had won back Ouyang Shua's trust with his accomplishments. At the same time, he had also won the trust of the commander of the Dragon Stallion Army, Bai Qi. After selecting the attacking force, the army immediately began to make arrangements. Boom, boom, dong dong. Accompanied by the familiar sound of war drums, the 4 armies simultaneously launched their attacks to provide cover. The real main attacking force, Chun Tang, had come. The Child Protection Division was also mixed in with the attacking force as they resolutely attacked the eastern wall of Hanoi. Because there was a limited number of places to spread out, Bai Qi, in order to be fair, arranged for Chun Tang to be the main attacking force in the first wave. The Child Protection Division would follow behind, ready to replace Chun Tang at any time. Of course, this was something that Chun Tang didn't want to see. "My sons, today is the day to make contributions. Follow me and kill." As he spoke, Chun Tang took the lead with his personal guards to launch an attack. The 70,000 soldiers followed behind him and charged toward the eastern gate. As soon as they came up, they assumed the stance of fighting to the death. They only stopped when they were 500 meters away from the city wall. Next, it was time for the construction equipment to perform. Siege vehicles, catapults, and mobile arrow towers were pushed to the forefront and began to suppress the defending army. Because they were marching through the tunnel, the amount of siege equipment they could carry was very limited, which was a shortcoming of the expeditionary army. Chun Tang didn't care at all. After the catapults and mobile arrow towers slightly suppressed the offensive of the defending army, he immediately issued an order to attack the city. One division after another was sent to the front line. Since he had made a military order, Chun Tang had no way out. The Annan defending army on the city wall also had no way out. They would either die on the city wall or wait for their country to be destroyed. The collision between the two forces was destined to be an extremely tragic confrontation. Under the counterattack of the Anon army, the ferocious Flying Bear army's first 3 waves of attacks were all in vain and were resolutely beaten back by the defending army. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers from the 1st Legion of the Flying Bear army died in battle. Chen Tang's face twitched when he saw this, but he made up his mind and sent out another fresh army. "My sons, the other party is a tough nut to crack, but the Flying Bear army isn't a coward. This battle concerns the honor of the Legion. Our brothers from the other legions are watching us from behind. The Marshal is watching us, and the King is watching us from thousands of miles away." Whether the Flying Bear army can make a name for itself depends on today's battle. Chen Tang was passionate and incessant to cheer for the officers and soldiers. His words made the soldiers' blood boil as they roared and charged forward. Kill! 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 This was the DNA of the great Xia army. This was the most formal professional army, and every one of them valued honor above their lives. An even crueler battle was about to begin. In order to boost morale, Chen Tang even ordered the division commanders to personally lead the charge and take down the eastern gate before noon. However, this was easier said than done. Regardless of whether it was the Anon Imperial Guards or the Anon combat players, they were all fighting with their backs against the wall. Behind them were their families, brothers, and friends. There was no way out. We can only fight to the death. From 8 o'clock in the morning, the battle in the east had entered a white-hot stage. Although the 1st Legion of the Flying Bear army was elite and the officers and soldiers were all fearless, Hanoi was a royal city after all. Not only were the city's defenses perfect, but they were also very rich. Successive attacks were met with setbacks. The tall city walls were like the graveyard of the Flying Bear army that devoured fresh lives. Chen Tang's face turned darker and darker. He clenched his fists unconsciously and stared straight ahead. At around 11 o'clock, the Flying Bear army had already lost nearly 30,000 soldiers, and nearly half of them were casualties. The Flying Bear army could be proud that they could hold on until now. The deputy general said to Chen Tang, "General, retreat and reorganize first. The officers and soldiers can't hold on any longer." Even though the military discipline of Great Xia was as strong as a mountain, such a large number of casualties inevitably shook the morale of the soldiers. Chen Tang pursed his lips and gritted his teeth, but he refused to relent. He's not resigned to this. Under the fierce attack of the Flying Bear army, the defenders at the top of the city walls weren't having a good time either. Let the officers and soldiers hold on a little longer. This was what Chen Tang was thinking, but before he could say anything, a messenger suddenly ran over from behind and said to Chen Tang, "General Chen, General Lai said that if you guys can't hold on any longer, you should retreat and let the Dragon Stallion army take over." "What did you say?" Chen Tang exploded upon hearing this. His eyes instantly turned red, and he stomped his feet in anger. "What a scoundrel. Go and tell that guy with the surname Lai to stay at one side. The Flying Bear army will break through the city gates soon. If he dares to charge at this time, don't blame us for being merciless." The messenger looked like he was in a difficult position. "Hurry up and go." Chen Tang was almost roaring like a ferocious tiger. The surrounding officers of the Flying Bear army were also apprehensive when they saw this. They really didn't know that the usually mild-mannered commander could be so frightening when he was angry. Yes, I'll go immediately." The messenger was stunned as well and hurriedly ran back to where he came from. Chen Tang didn't have the energy to pay attention to a messenger anymore. He quickly turned around, looked at the surrounding officers of the Flying Bear army, and said loudly, "Did everyone hear that? If we don't take down the city gates, those bastards from the Dragon Stallion army will shit on our heads. Can you tolerate that?" "No, I can't either." Chen Tang took a deep breath and unsheathed the sword at his waist. "I won't say anything unnecessary. My sons, follow me and kill. We won't rest until we break through the city gates. Kill, kill, kill." Chapter 1021. Commander Chun Tang personally put on his armor, and the Flying Bear Army was on fire. Strictly speaking, this was the first legion of the Flying Bear Army's first battle in Great Xia. They did not want to retreat in disgrace so that the Dragon Stallion Army could take advantage of them. Even if we die, we must die while charging. The soldiers of the Flying Bear Army stepped on the corpses of their compatriots and launched wave after wave of attacks on the city wall, unafraid of death. This time, the defenders on the city wall could not hold on any longer. They had been pushed to their limits by the Flying Bear Army in the first place. Now that they suffered another attack, their battle line immediately collapsed. Kill them. Protected by his guards, Chen Tang successfully scaled the city wall and started a massacre. Kill them. The morale of the Flying Bear Army soared. After a deafening explosion, after half an hour of hard fighting, the Flying Bear Army finally took the East Gate before noon, accomplishing the mission given by the command center. Huh! The soldiers were so excited that they couldn't help but shout. In the distance, Bai Qi smiled imperceptibly when he saw that. He then gave an order. Relay my order. The 1st Legion of the Flying Bear Army has made the greatest contribution in the Battle of Hanoi. Ask the Child Care Division to reinforce them and increase the victory. Yes, sir. The messenger rushed away. At the front line, following the order, Lai Huer led his troops to the city gate. Seeing Chun Tang covered in blood, he raised his thumb and said with a smile, "Good job, Flying Bear Army." The other soldiers of the Dragon Stallion Army looked at the Flying Bear Army in agreement. Even the Dragon Stallion Army was not certain that they could take the East Gate in such a short time, but the Flying Bear Army had done it. The strong had always been worshipped in the army, and the Flying Bear Army had won the praise of their allies. Chen Tang smiled and shook hands with Lai Huer. The previous misunderstanding was naturally resolved. Brothers of the Flying Bear Army, you worked hard. We'll take care of the rest. Lai Huer waved his right hand and gave the order to press forward, ready to crush the defenders on the East Gate. Chen Tang did not insist. The 1st Legion of the Flying Bear Army had indeed suffered heavy casualties. Now that they had made the greatest contribution, they tactfully retreated. We have to leave some soup for our allies. The Child Care Division had been conserving their strength. Now that they were advancing, they felt like Mount Tai was crushing them. On the other hand, the Annan garrison could no longer block a hole in their defensive line. They were in a state of complete defeat. In just an hour, apart from the East Gate, which was the main gate, the other 2 gates on the flanks were also taken down by the Lai Protection Division. The entire east side was completely penetrated by the Great Xia Army. Seeing this, Bai Qi looked at Luo Shixin and Yi Lai and said, "It's your turn." Understood. Luo Shixin and Yi Lai had been waiting for a long time. Upon receiving the order, they turned around and left in high spirits. After a while, the rumbling sound of hooves could be heard coming from the battlefield. The elite cavalry of Great Xia had finally set off. The vast number of cavalrymen followed the 3 city gates and charged into Wangcheng River like 3 torrents of steel. When the other 3 defenders learned that the east side had fallen, they lost their will to fight. With Bai Qi's keen senses, he grasped the opportunity and gave the order to attack from all sides. In just an hour, the 4 city gates of Hanoi had fallen one after another, and the entire city was on the verge of falling. More than 500,000 Great Xia soldiers swarmed into the city like a tide. Unstoppable. Once the city was breached, the fate of Hanoi and even Annam could be imagined. There were no more surprises in the ensuing battle. At around 3 in the afternoon, following the shattering of the stone tablet in the royal palace, a system announcement resounded throughout the world. World announcement. Congratulations to the player from the China region for conquering Annam. The news has spread far and wide with unparalleled military merits. Special reward of 100,000 merit points and 200,000 reputation points as encouragement. Congratulations to the player. The Battle of Annam could be said to be the battle in which Great Xia killed the most enemies. According to preliminary estimates, the number of Annam combat professional players who died in the hands of the Great Xia army was no less than 1 million. Including the Imperial Guards and the Coastal Defense Cities Army, Killing the enemy alone brought Ouyang Shuo a million merit points. This was really scary. A million merit points was equivalent to a duke's title. Since the beginning of the game, only 2 dukes, Ouyang Shuo and Jack, were born. How could other lords not be envious and jealous? Sure enough, a war was the fastest way to accumulate merit points. World announcement: Annam has been destroyed. The levels, skills, techniques, and all other game achievements of all the players in Annam have been cleared. At the same time, they will be collectively teleported to the sealed land as punishment. As soon as the announcement was made, millions of Annam players were mercilessly teleported away before they could even wail. Winner takes all, and the war was just that cruel. Following the fall of Hanoi, the war ended, and the mutants were teleported away. The surviving members of the Annam Imperial Guards had no choice but to surrender. The exact number of prisoners of war had to be calculated in detail. World announcement: the player from the China region, how do you have nothing, has won the war. The China region has obtained 10 national honor points. At the same time, all players in the China region will be rewarded with an innate attribute +1 as encouragement. Congratulations to the China region. This was the 4th time that Great Xia had obtained honor points for the China region. While most of the other countries had 0 honor points, the China region had already obtained 40 points. Such an achievement was absolutely unprecedented. The admiration of the players in the China region for Great Xia had reached a new peak. In the voting for the leaders of the war that had just ended, Ouyang Shuo's votes were far ahead. As of the 1st of May, he had accumulated more than 57 million votes, becoming the undisputed leader of the war. The test in front of Ouyang Shuo was how to obtain the national weapon, Xinyuan sword. 5th year of Gaia, 6th of May, Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo handed the responsibility of dealing with the aftermath of the Annam region to Bai Qi and the cabinet. The appointed governor of Annam, Hu Zongxian, had also rushed over to Annam to preside over the takeover and reconstruction of Annam. Ouyang Shuo was only concerned about 2 things. One was the fate of West Shu, and the other was the pair of twins that were about to be born. The 15th of May was the date of the birth of the twins. During this period of time, Song Jia had been staying in the harem. Apart from stabilizing the pregnancy, the most important thing was to prepare the necessities for the twins. From the cradle to the diapers, Song Jia personally took care of everything. She wasn't even willing to hire a wet nurse, as she wanted to raise the twins herself. Ouyang Shuo was extremely supportive of this. Although Great Xia was a feudal dynasty, Ouyang Shuo didn't wish for his family to become feudal. Instead, he welcomed this rapidly changing world with an open mind. The Chinese culture had a long history. The essence was worth inheriting and developing, while the dregs should be resolutely discarded. Ouyang Shuo still had this bit of willpower. As for the matter of West Shu, the situation was more complicated. After giving up on the Guangxi province, the Yin-Huang alliance once again stabilized their footing. The 760,000-strong army steadily advanced towards West Shu's capital, Peng City. As of today, over 90% of the Ludong province where West Shu was located belonged to the Yin-Huang alliance. The next step was the Battle of Peng City, a battle of life and death. During this time, although the overlord Xiang Yu had displayed his invincible might, causing heavy losses to the allied forces and even turning the tide of the battle, he was still outnumbered. Under the command of Wu Qi, Tian Dan, and Lien Pe, they wouldn't give West Shu any chances. Looking at the situation, West Shu couldn't turn the tide at all. Not to mention turning the tide. Even if West Shu wanted to escape, they had nowhere to go. The north and south sides were the territories of the Yin-Huang alliance. The east side was the East Sea, which was sealed off by the 3 fleets of the Yin-Huang alliance. The most likely place was the west side, which was the Great Han dynasty that was entrenched in the Central Plains province. However, the day before yesterday, Emperor Wu of Han publicly announced that the Great Han dynasty wouldn't accept any West Shu people. If they dared to cross the border, they would be killed. It seemed that the injustice between Shu and Han could not be solved. Now West Shu was completely in a hopeless situation. The players of the China region were already talking about it, saying that the overlord Xiangyu was going to have another farewell at the Wu River. If the battle at the Fei River was included, Xiangyu had lost 3 times, which was a very cruel blow. 3 battles, 3 defeats, a hero at the end of his road. The players of the China region hoped that this war would end soon so that they could prepare for the war in June. West Chu, Peng City. With the continuous setbacks on the front lines, this once prosperous city was shrouded in a huge shadow. There were millions of River East citizens living in the city, and they were the last trump card of West Chu. The problem in front of West Chu was whether to drag the citizens to die with them, or to judge the situation and choose to surrender to the Yin-Huang alliance. Di Chun had already said that if West Chu was willing to surrender, the Yin-Huang alliance would treat them well and protect the wealth of the Xiang clan. Di Chun even asked Fan Zeng, who was wandering in the wilderness, to come to Peng City to persuade them. The problem was, with Xiang Yu's personality, would he surrender? If he would, he wouldn't be the overlord of West Chu. For this reason, some people in the Xiang clan were hesitant. Few people could see through life and death and accompany Xiang Yu to fight for justice. Xiang Yin, Xiang Liang, and the others were very worried about this. On the morning of May 7th, Xiang Yu led his troops back to Peng City. In the Overlord's mansion, besides Xiang Yu, Xiang Yin, Xiang Liang, Xiang Bo, Xiang Zhuang, Yu Ji, and others were all there. The core figures of the Xiang clan were all here. What was more special was that Yu Ji's belly was slightly bulging. She was pregnant. The future of West Chu would be decided in today's meeting. There were 3 choices in front of them. In addition to fighting to the death and surrendering, West Chu actually had one last way out, and that was to ally with Great Xia. A few days ago, the Overlord's mansion welcomed a special guest. It was the envoy of Honglu Temple of Great Xia. How did they come? The secret was on the magic-powered submarine, the Black Shark. The Black Shark broke through the blockade of the Yin-Huang alliance and successfully arrived at Peng City. Under the arrangement of the Black Snake Guards, it secretly contacted Uncle Xiang and brought Ouyang Shua's greetings. Ouyang Shua meant that if West Chu really couldn't be saved, Great Xia would open the door to the Xiang clan. The conditions promised by the Yin-Huang alliance, Great Xia would only be better, whether in terms of strength or feelings compared to the Yin-Huang alliance. Great Xia was a better choice. Not to mention that during the War of West Chu, Great Xia not only repeatedly warned them, but also tried to save West Chu from destruction by besieging Wei. The Xiang clan had to return this favor. The problem now was Xiang Yu willing to leave? Chapter 10:22. Xiang Yu was an unparalleled hero and a valiant general. There was no problem with that. However, as long as they were heroes, there would always be some stubbornness. They would rather die in battle than submit to someone else. It was harder for Xiang Yu to bow down to someone than to kill him. However, after 2 failures, Xiang Yu had matured a lot. He did not achieve hegemony in the wilderness, but he felt a lot. He could die in battle, but he could not selfishly abandon his family. Moreover, Xiang Yu looked at his wife. Even a man of steel could have a soft spot. His wife was pregnant. This was the biggest comfort for Xiang Yu. This time, he could not be too selfish. After much discussion, Xiang Yu finally made up his mind. He looked at his grandfather, Xiang Yin, and said, "Grandfather, I am the hegemon king of Western Chu. I can't back down, but my children are innocent. Grandfather, please bring Yu Ji and the others to Great Xia. Even though I do not like Emperor Xia, he is a man of his word. The legacy of the family cannot be cut off." Xiang Yin was moved. "What about you?" "Me?" Xiang Yu smiled. "Again, there is only a hegemon who dies in battle. There is no Xiang Yu who surrenders." "Husband." When Yu Ji heard this, her eyes turned red and she looked pitiful. No one knew Xiang Yu better than Yu Ji. She had a lot of things to say, but she could not say a word. She could commit suicide at River Wu, but now that she was pregnant, she could not do it. Xiang Yu smiled gently. Similarly, he knew his wife very well. He said, "Yu Ji, live well and raise our child." "Husband." Tears streamed down Yu Ji's face. Xiang Zhuang and the rest saw this and felt bad. Don't be so wishy-washy. Leave Pingqing tonight before the enemy seals it off. Xiang Zhuang suddenly said, Brother, I will stay with you. Xiang Yu was furious. He slammed the table and stood up. What are you staying for? There are many famous generals in Xia Kingdom. You have to take responsibility if the family wants to establish a foothold in Xia Kingdom. Yes. Xiang Zhuang was ashamed. The matter was settled. Everyone collected themselves and went to prepare. That night, the core members of the Xiang family brought a batch of the most precious treasures of Western Shu. Under the cover of the night, they left the city in a carriage and headed east. They arrived at the seaside just before dawn. There, the black shark was already ready. The group of people looked in the direction of Peng City from afar with complicated feelings. They held back their tears and boarded the submarine, disappearing into the vast ocean. When Fanzeng discovered that the Xiang clan had disappeared, it was already the afternoon of the 8th of May. Dichan received the report. Without hesitation, he ordered the allied forces to besiege Peng City. Where did the Xiang family go? Dichan was confused. Logically speaking, the entire Ludong province was tightly surrounded by the allied forces. There was no reason for anyone to escape. There were many talents in the Xiang clan. How could Dichan let them go so easily? While ordering the allied forces to attack Peng City, Dichan sent an order to the Imperial Wind to search for the whereabouts of the Xiang clan. If they're alive, I want to see them. If they're dead, I want to see their bodies. From Dichan's point of view, these people should be hiding in the deep mountains and dense forests to take refuge. There might even be the shadows of the great Xia's secret agents among them. As long as I can't get out of the Ludong province, I will find you even if I have to dig 3 feet into the ground, Dichan thought. The Yin-Huang alliance had paid such a huge price to attack the West Chu. What they wanted was not just a desolate province. The talents of the Xiang clan were also an important motivation. Therefore, how could Dichan let them go so easily? The siege began on the 9th of May. That battle was earth-shattering, and the colors of the mountains and rivers changed. Xiang Yu was determined to die. He led the warriors of the river east and fought with the allied forces of the Yin-Huang alliance for 2 days and 2 nights. The two sides first fought on the city walls, then turned to the street battles, and finally the overlord's mansion. The entire Peng City was soaked in blood. It was like an endless hell. The bravery of the overlord and the strength of the River East warriors were really rare in the world. Even when facing an enemy 4 times their number, they were not at a disadvantage. Each of them was like a tireless warrior. Unless they died in battle, there was no retreat. Every time they fought, the number of warriors from the River East would decrease sharply. In the end, only Xiang Yu was left alone. Xiang Yu stood in the square in front of the overlord's mansion. Corpses were piled up around him. Blood soaked the snow-white marble floor. Xiang Yu was already completely covered in blood. Tick, tick, tick. Because he had killed too many people, the blood flowed along the overlord's halberd and dripped onto the ground, forming a pool of blood. Xiang Yu, why don't you surrender? Lian stepped forward and tried to persuade Xiang Yu for the last time. It was such a pity that such a peerless general had died like this. Bah! Xiang Yu did not want to talk nonsense. He raised his halberd and charged forward. Kill him. Lian saw this and knew that it was useless to say anything else. He could only kill him. Kill. The elites of the allied forces received the order and surrounded him. In the end, the overlord Xiang Yu died of exhaustion under the siege of the allied forces. The soul of a peerless overlord returned to heaven and earth. There was no possibility of him being resurrected. Lian sighed inwardly when he saw this. At the same time, he felt a lingering fear. Even though the allied forces had the advantage in numbers, they still paid a heavy price to take down the West Chu. In this battle, a total of 180,000 elites were completely buried in the battlefield of the West Chu. In the Battle of Peng City alone, more than 40,000 elites were killed in battle. The West Chu had used such an impressive battle record to defend their honor. But that was just honor. At this point, the West Chu that had occupied the wilderness for 3 years had officially been annihilated. In the entire wilderness, other than the king city and the foreign tribes, there were no other NPC forces. The moment Xiangyu died, Yu Ji and the rest had just arrived at the pier of the North Sea harbor. Although it was afternoon, a comet streaked across the sky, emitting a blinding light. Yu Ji felt something in her heart. She stared blankly at the comet that flashed by, tears welling up in her eyes. Husband. Overwhelmed with grief, Yu Ji fainted on the ground. In the entire China region, there were many who saw this comet. In the Xia Palace, Ouyang Shuo stood in front of the window of the imperial study, looking at the comet that streaked across the sky. He muttered to himself, "A great leader has fallen. This is the misfortune of China." If Xiangyu was willing, Ouyang Shuo was generous enough to accept this overlord to lead an army in the Great Xia. Unfortunately, the heavens did not grant his wishes. Handan City. Dichen also noticed the comet and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It's finally over. At this moment, his merit points officially broke through the million mark, and he was promoted to the Duke rank. The system announcement sounded. World announcement. Congratulations to player Dichen of the China region for becoming the third lord to be promoted to the Duke rank. He will be given the title Duke of Handan and will be rewarded 40,000 reputation points. The King City will distribute the rewards accordingly. The world was shocked when the announcement was made. No one had expected that 2 of the top 3 dukes in the world would be from the China region. William and the other lords felt a sense of urgency. All of them worked hard to make use of the upcoming war to earn a lot of merit points and be promoted to the Duke rank as soon as possible. We're already too far behind. William's expression was a little ugly. It was foreseeable that after the war ended in June, there would be a batch of dukes. Following that, there would be the emergence of many dynasties. The players of the China region were naturally happy and felt that they had gained a lot of face. However, it was not without hidden worries. As Dichen was promoted to the Duke rank, the competition between the Yin-Huang alliance and the Great Xia would probably become even more intense. Perhaps this was the worry of happiness. After a lot of hard work and planning, Dichen had finally achieved his wish. With Handan City's heritage, it would soon be promoted to the capital city, laying a solid foundation for the establishment of a dynasty. The China region seemed to be ushering in an extraordinary era. Dichen was secretly excited when he suddenly received an urgent report from Lian Pe. It turned out that after killing Xiangyu, Lian Pe was in charge of taking over Peng City and searching the treasury. He was shocked when he saw what he found. Lian Pe had searched all the treasuries, including the secret room of the Overlord's mansion. Other than ordinary rations and weapons, there was not a single precious item. It was extremely strange. The West Chu had occupied the wilderness for 3 years, so it was impossible that there were no treasures. Thinking of the Xiang clan that had not been seen until now, it was obvious that the treasures had been taken away by the Xiang clan. Dichen's face turned green with anger when he saw it. This is ridiculous. Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. Even if you have to turn the entire Ludong province upside down, you must find them for me. At this moment, Peerless Elegance hurried in. Seeing that Dichen was in a rage, Peerless Elegance wanted to say something, but stopped. Seeing this, Dichen said in a low voice, "What other bad news do you have? Tell me all at once. I can still handle it." Peerless Elegance looked at Dichen with some sympathy and said, "Imperial Wind, just got the news that Xiang Yin and the others appeared in Shanghai City and were personally received by the old fox." Crack! The brush in his hand was broken into 2 by Dichen. The room fell into a dead silence. This was a huge blow to Dichen. It was like Ouyang Shuo slapping Dichen in the face when he was at his best. This kind of pain was excruciating. I want to know, how did they escape? What does Imperial Wind do? Are they all a bunch of useless people? There were so many of them, yet they managed to slip away from under our noses. Dichen's voice was very cold, like the cold wind of the north, bone-chilling. This is very strange. Imperial Wind guarantee that they have deployed the entire border, and no one has retreated. Even the west side is guarded, so it is impossible for them to escape. Peerless elegance was also very confused. Could it be that those people grew wings and flew away? Di Chen's words were full of sarcasm. In his opinion, this must be the excuse of imperial wind. But peerless elegance had a different view, the style of imperial wind. They would not dare to be careless in this kind of matter. Perhaps Xiang Yin and the others used some kind of special tool, such as a teleportation talisman. The game world was rich and colorful, and there were all kinds of strange tools. If there really were teleportation talismans, then there was nothing strange about it. Hearing this, Di Chen's heart was bleeding. No matter how the Great Xia did it, the result was Yan Huang Alliance had sacrificed a lot to take down West Chu. For this, they had even abandoned the entire Guangxi province. In the end, the most valuable spoils of war were easily taken away by the Great Xia. We must take revenge for this. Di Chen's face was fierce. Chapter 1023. During this period of time, the situation in China was changing rapidly. First, Great Xia unexpectedly conquered Annam. While it excited the people, it also caused greater uneasiness in ASEAN. Especially the two countries bordering Annam, Southern Palm and Jinla, were even more terrified. They were afraid that one day Great Xia would wield the butcher's knife against them and start a new round of war. Then, Yan Huang Alliance conquered West Chu. Overlord Xiang Yu fell, and the comet pierced through the sun, causing heated discussion among the people. Then, Di Chan was suddenly promoted to duke, which was unprecedented. At this time, the forum suddenly revealed that Xiang Yin, Yu Ji, and the others had appeared in Shanghai City. The dramatic scenes that were constantly changing made the players dazzled and excited. Shanghai City, Summer Palace. Greetings, Your Majesty. After settling the fainted Yu Ji, Xiang Yin and the others came to pay their respects under the guidance of Qingyi, a scholar of the secret literature pavilion. When they bowed, Xiang Yin, Xiang Liang, and Xiang Bo could still look normal, at least on the surface. However, the younger Xiang Zhuang's expression was somewhat unnatural, and his bowing was also very stiff. It was no wonder. A few days ago, they were still the royal family of West Chu, high and mighty. In the blink of an eye, their country was destroyed, and they became a group of wandering people. Such a huge gap was not something that anyone could immediately turn around. When Ouyang Shua saw this, he didn't think much of it and said, West Chu is Great Xia's ally, and he, Jim and Xiang Yu, is also someone this king respects. This king is deeply saddened by what happened to West Chu. When Xiang Yin and the others heard this, their expressions were gloomy. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. This time, the Xiang clan was able to survive in the hands of the enemy, and it is all thanks to Your Majesty. The Xiang clan will be loyal to the country. Since things had already developed to this point, Xiang Yin and the others could only accept the reality and did not dare to have any other thoughts. Not to mention that the soul of the clan, Xiang Yu, was dead. Even if he was not dead, there was no place for the Xiang clan in the wilderness. Making a comeback was just an extravagant hope. The wilderness of today was no longer the same as it had been a few years ago. The wars between the feudal lords were coming to an end, and the large cake that was the wilderness had been completely divided up, leaving no room for others to step in. Ouyang Shua nodded his head in satisfaction when he heard Xiang Yan's pledge of loyalty. If the Xiang clan really didn't know what was good for them and still held on to the lofty attitude of the imperial clan of the past, although Ouyang Shua wouldn't go to the extent of expelling them, he would at most guarantee them a lifetime of riches and honor. He would absolutely not put them in an important position. Ouyang Shua didn't hesitate to bestow a courtyard house with 4 rooms in the city to the patriarch of the Xiang clan, Xiang Yin, on the spot. It would serve as the gateway for the Xiang clan in Shanghai City. As early as when Shanghai City was being planned, the construction department had followed Ouyang Shua's request and built several official residences in the vicinity of King City in preparation for rewarding the ministers in the future. Every time a historical talent came to him, whether it was a civil official or a military general or a poet like Li Bai, Ouyang Shua would bestow them with a house to show that the king was generous. "Thank you, your majesty." Xiang Yin bowed and thanked him, his heart finally at ease. The current Shanghai city was no less prosperous than Royal City, and some places had even surpassed Royal City. Other than the reserved land for the emperor, there was no empty space in the city. The Xiang clan naturally didn't lack money, but it was extremely difficult for them to purchase a house in Shanghai City that was suitable to their status. A house in a prime location couldn't be bought even if one had money. The Xia dynasty was full of vigor and vigor. The civil and military officials in the imperial court were also hard-working and promising, and there were very few who were demoted. Naturally, it wouldn't be like the capital cities in history, where there would be mansions of sinners left behind. The only way to do so was through Ouyang Shua's reward. After thanking him, Xiang Yin tactfully presented 2 treasures to Ouyang Shua. Although they had left Peng City in a hurry, the real treasures of West Chu had been taken away by Xiang Yin and the others. Ouyang Shua didn't refuse and nodded to accept it. At this point, the meeting between the monarch and the minister finally came to an end. As for the position arrangement for Xiang Yin and the others, it would have to wait until the new round of army reorganization. When they were talking just now, Xiang Yin and Xiang Zhuang expressed their intention to hold a position in the army, but Xiang Liang and Uncle Xiang weren't very enthusiastic. They probably wanted to keep their positions and focus on managing the clan's affairs. Ouyang Shua didn't mind. Xiang Yin alone was enough. Especially Uncle Xiang, even if he wanted to become an official in the Xia dynasty, Ouyang Shua wasn't very willing. After the establishment of the Han dynasty, Liu Bang was bestowed with the surname Liu and the title of Marquis of Xiyang to repay Uncle Xiang's kindness in saving his life at the banquet at Hongmen. Ouyang Shua really disdained to care about such a person. As for the other clansmen of the Xiang clan, they only needed to follow the normal procedures, and Ouyang Shua didn't need to personally arrange for them. After sending off Xiang Yin and the others, Ouyang Shua was full of emotions. Xiang Yu was still Xiang Yu after all. Even though he had children to worry about, he was still unwilling to submit to others and was unwilling to be under someone else. There were 2 items on the table. They were the meeting gifts given by Xiang Yin. If the Xiang clan wanted to establish a foothold in the Xia dynasty, Ouyang Shua's attitude was extremely crucial. Although Xiang Yin was a fierce general, he had lived for most of his life after all, so he still understood the ways of the world. The 2 items that were presented were the 2 most precious treasures of the Xiang clan. Golden armor talisman, purple gold after use. It can form a protective golden light outside the body, immune to all physical attacks. Lasts for half an hour, effective range of 5,000 people. Jiangdong Warrior Summon Card, purple gold one-time consumable. After use, it can summon 10,000 Jiangdong Warrior to assist in battle. Lasts for 12 hours. These 2 treasures could indeed display miraculous effects if used properly. Ouyang Shua kept them in his storage bag. Over the next few days, as the situation in Annan gradually stabilized, other than the Dragon Xiang army that was ordered to guard Annan, the other expeditionary forces gradually returned to their respective encampments. The Flying Bear army was rather special. They would retreat to the Yunnan province through the border tunnel, then travel all the way north and move their encampment to Xuchang County. There, the commander of the Flying Bear army, Li Jing, had been waiting for a long time. That tunnel would continue to be widened and become an important link between the Annan province and the mainland. In the Battle of Annan, a total of 480,000 Imperial Guards and 150,000 soldiers from the Territorial Army in Haiphong City were captured. After eliminating the wounded and unqualified soldiers, there were still 57 prisoners of war waiting to be reorganized. Although the battle results were plentiful, the expeditionary forces also suffered a lot of casualties. Including the Navy, the Great Xia Expeditionary Forces lost a total of 150,000 soldiers in the Battle of Annan, which was the largest loss in history. After calculating the number of soldiers in each department, the actual number of prisoners of war that could be reorganized was about 420,000. How to reorganize this huge army of prisoners of war had become the top priority of the Privy Council. Ouyang Shuo had to make a decision personally and come up with a plan in advance. The principle of reorganizing an army was to look at the number gap and strategic positioning. At present, among the army groups, there was still a gap in the Imperial Guards and 3 in the Flying Bear Army. Other than that, the other army groups were all at full strength. As for the strategic positioning, it was whether to establish the Annan Corps. After thinking for a few days, Ouyang Shuo finally decided on an army reorganization plan. Apart from filling in the 3 corps of the Flying Bear Army, the gap in the Imperial Guards would not be filled for the time being. All the army groups had suffered losses in this battle, and the new reinforcements had weakened their combat power to a certain extent. As such, it was inadvisable to mobilize elite soldiers to form the Imperial Guard Corps. Ouyang Shuo assigned the remaining 3 corps to the Annan Corps. Ouyang Shuo naturally had his reasons for doing so. In order to control ASEAN, it was not enough to just take down Annan. Ouyang Shuo planned to continue westward and take down Southern Palm and Junla in one fell swoop. This was also the reason why Ouyang Shuo had the Dragon Stallion Army move their headquarters to the Annan province. Compared to Annan's 8 million players, Junla only had 2 million, and Southern Palm only had 600,000. The two countries added together were not even a quarter of Annan's. With Bai Qi overseeing things, the Dragon Stallion Army and the Annan Corps alone were enough to sweep through the two countries. There was no need for the headquarters to send reinforcement from afar. The cost of transporting troops by sea was still very high. At this time, the benefits of taking down Annan became apparent. With the Annan province as a bridgehead, both the transfer of troops and logistics could be settled in Annan. There was no need for a long expedition. This alone could save them millions of gold coins in military expenses. In addition to the reorganization of the army, Ouyang Shuo also issued an order to establish the Southwest War Zone. The commander of this war zone would be the Dragon Stallion armies by Qi, with the Dragon Stallion Army and the Annan Corps under him. In this way, the structure of the army had been adjusted, and Bai Qi was given greater military authority. This could also be considered a reward for Bai Qi's campaign in Annan. After finalizing the reorganization plan, a series of appointments and removals of generals were also announced. An imperial edict appointed Xiang Yan as the commander of the 3rd Corps of the Flying Bear Army. As a famous general of the Chu Kingdom, Xiang Yan had no objections to being appointed as the commander upon his arrival. The former commander of the 1st Division of the 3rd Corps of the Stalwart Tiger Army, Song Wu, was promoted to the commander of the 4th Corps of the Flying Bear Army. Song Wu had been a commander for several years, and after some consideration, Ouyang Shuo decided to promote him. This could also be considered a consolation for the Song clan. The former commander of the 1st Corps of the Imperial Guard, Lei Jingtian, was promoted to the commander of the 5th Corps of the Flying Bear Army. Lei Jingtian had long been promoted to a king-level general, becoming another valiant general of the barbarians after Shihu. This promotion was because Lei Jingtian was indeed worthy of great responsibility, and also because of Ouyang Shuo's care for the mountain barbarians. Shui Renge, who was the deputy commander of the 3rd Corps of the Imperial Guard, was directly promoted to the commander of the Annan Corps, ushering in a huge leap. Pei Xingjian, a famous general of the Great Tang, was also promoted to the commander of the 1st Corps of the Annan Corps. The surrendered general of the Annan Corps, Li Li, was appointed as the commander of the 2nd Corps of the Annan Corps. This arrangement, in addition to Li Li's own ability, was also to appease the people of Annan and the prisoners of war, and to show that Great Xia treated everyone equally. Xiang Yu's cousin, Xiang Zhuang, was appointed as the commander of the 3rd Corps of the Annan Corps. In historical records, Xiang Zhuang's reputation was not prominent. Apart from showing his face once at the Hongmen banquet, he was basically invisible. His ability to lead troops was not very outstanding. Xiang Zhuang was appointed as the commander because of Ouyang Shuo's care for the Xiang clan. Chapter 1024. Gaia Year 5, May 15th, Summer Palace. On this day, Ouyang Shua's son and daughter were born. According to the cabinet's suggestion, the boy was called Ouyang Yu because he was born 10 minutes earlier. He was fortunate enough to be the elder brother. The girl was called Ouyang Luo. She was the younger sister. As soon as the news came out, all the officials presented their congratulations. Ouyang Shua even took the opportunity to announce a general amnesty. As long as the prisoners of Great Xia didn't commit any heinous crimes, they would all be pardoned and released. This was to show that the king's grace was vast and the whole world was celebrating. Everlasting Palace. As he gazed at the pair of fair and tender children in swaddling clothes, Ouyang Shua revealed a rare, gentle smile, and there was both the nervousness of becoming a father for the first time and the joy of having a successor. No matter if it was Yu or Luo, the moment they were born, they were already extraordinary. Both of them had a totem on their right forearm. One was a golden dragon, and the other was a fire phoenix. When the palace maid saw this, they were all shocked, speechless. Zisu, the head of the female officials, said with a smile, "The prince and the princess are indeed dragons and phoenixes among men, born extraordinary." Ouyang Shua smiled faintly and said, "Pass down the decree. The birth of the king's heir, all the female officials and palace maids of the Xia Palace will be rewarded according to their ranks." "Thank you for your reward, Your Majesty." Zisu led a group of female officials to accept the decree and express their gratitude. Ouyang Shua waved his hand. Finally, he looked at his wife, who was leaning on the bed, and said with a smile, "Madam, you've worked hard. Have a good rest. I'll go to the front hall first and come back later." Song Jia smiled gently. "Husband, go and do your work." Ouyang Shua rushed to the front hall. Other than receiving the congratulatory greetings from the hundreds of officials, he also wanted to see someone. It was the Annan Governor-General, Hu Zongxian, who had just returned from Hanoi. It had been 10 days since the end of the Annan War. Although the trauma of the war couldn't be healed immediately, the turmoil caused by the war had gradually subsided. Hu Zongxian wanted to personally report to His Majesty on how to govern the Annan province. In addition, Hu Zongxian had also brought a batch of treasures, which were obtained from raiding all the treasuries in King City, including the treasury of Coastal Defense City. All the valuable items had already been transported to the capital. Just in time for the birth of the heir to the throne, Hu Zongxian could be considered to have touched a good fortune. In the coming days, the governors of all the provinces would come to the capital one by one to congratulate him on this matter. Among the items confiscated, there was no need to mention the gold, silver, and jewels. As for how to deal with them, the cabinet had its own rules and regulations. There was no need for Ouyang Shua to worry about it. Naturally, Hu Zongxian only presented 2 of the rarest treasures. 1,000-year ginseng, purple gold top-grade medicinal ingredient that can also be used as a tonic. Although the introduction was short, it was a truly rare item. It just so happened that Song Jia had just given birth and needed to stop. This 1,000-year-old ginseng came at just the right time. Truth Listener Talisman. Purple gold can inquire about a specific person's conversation at a specific time. Legend had it that Truth Listener was a divine beast that lay beneath Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's scripture table. It could recognize everything in the world through listening, especially when it came to listening to people's hearts. This was simply a divine tool for eavesdropping, and it could be used in crucial situations. After accepting the 2 treasures presented by Hu Zongxian, Ouyang Shua began to explain his plans for the Annan province. The first sentence he said made Hu Zongxian excited. The Annan province is just a transition. In the future, after conquering South Palm and Chenla, the 3 regions will merge into one province. I have even thought of a name. It will be called Hanoi Province. After a pause, Ouyang Shua said, "Ruzhun, do well in Annan, don't let me down." The meaning behind his words was already very clear. The future governor of Hanoi would definitely be Hu Zongxian. If the 3 regions were to really merge, Hanoi Province will be ranked among the top 3 provinces in terms of area and strategic position. Naturally, the status of the governor of Hanoi would also rise along with it. I will definitely sacrifice my life to repay the king's kindness. Hu Zongxian solemnly nodded. The tunnel connecting Annan and Yunnan is the lifeline of the inland and ASEAN. You have to pay attention to it and cooperate with Yunnan province. Use this as an opportunity to open up a trade route. Ouyang Shua continued to instruct. One end of the tunnel was connected to Yunnan province's Mengding County and the other to Annan province's Gaoping County. Hence, it was named Menggao Tunnel. Whether it was Mengding County or Gaoping County, they were both mountainous areas with rugged mountain roads. To really open up a trade route for both sides was not an easy task and required a lot of manpower and resources. In terms of finances, the imperial court will provide a certain amount of support. As for the specific operation, it will require the two governors to personally coordinate. Ouyang Shuo reassured Hu Zongxian. Understand, Hu Zongxian was fearless. He was a person who did practical things and was not afraid of difficulties. In addition, the Annan province has to play the role of a middleman to mediate the relationship between the dynasty and the ASEAN countries, especially Johor, Siam, and other countries. You have to focus on appeasing them and exchanging trade routes to let them feel the dynasty's sincerity. You must not allow the ASEAN countries to become one. Since Great Xia had no intention of doing so, it was impossible for them to really make all the ASEAN countries kneel down. Wouldn't that mean offending everyone? Appeasing one group and suppressing another group was the way of the king. This point, Ouyang Shua had to clearly explain to Hu Zongxian to prevent any mishaps. Hu Zongxian listened and silently noted it down. Apart from the above 3 points, the rest were minor details. Even if Ouyang Shua didn't mention it, the cabinet would also worry about it. In the worst-case scenario, Hu Zongxian could still improvise in Annan. Over the next 2 days, Ouyang Shua received a steady stream of congratulations. Some came personally, such as Lin Jing, Xie Xiyun, and the others. Some sent representatives, such as Feng Qiuhuang. Most of the congratulatory messages were sent through letters, such as Bloody Romance. Of course, among the congratulatory crowds, there were also people with other intentions. They were the leaders of some large guilds, but they came for the satellite cities of Annan. According to the usual practice, Great Xia would hold an auction for the satellite cities and make a huge profit. Apart from introducing the guilds of the satellite cities, Ouyang Shua also intended to attract a group of adventure players to settle down in the Annan province in order to spread the Han culture and expand its influence. All in all, Tianshanxi City was extraordinarily lively these few days. At this moment, a series of system announcements were suddenly heard, stirring up the atmosphere. System announcement. Congratulations to player Di Qian for becoming the second lord in the China server to be promoted to a capital city. The reward is 90,000 achievement points. Congratulations. World announcement. Congratulations to player Di Qian from the China server for becoming the third lord in the world to be promoted to a capital city. The reward is 100,000 achievement points and 150,000 reputation points. Congratulations. With the announcement, Di Chun was in the limelight. In less than 10 days, Di Chun completed the capital city promotion mission. It was a godly speed. Just as everyone was in awe of Handan City's promotion speed, another system announcement sounded, catching everyone off guard. System announcement. The second capital city in the China server has been born, triggering the battle system. The 9th battle, the Battle of Cliff Mountain, will officially begin in 3 days. Please look forward to it. Friendly reminder, the Battle of Cliff Mountain is a non-mandatory battle scenario mission. Only territories that have been promoted to a level 3 county city are eligible to participate. It was already the 17th of May, and the month of war was approaching in June. However, a battle was triggered at this time. Even Di Chan was caught off guard by this sudden change. Gaia is really capricious. Ouyang Shua, who was receiving the visiting envoy at the Xia Palace, shook his head helplessly. When it came to this battle, there were many things that could be said about it. Strictly speaking, the Battle of Cliff Mountain was not a grand or exciting battle. In a sense, there was nothing special about this battle. If that was the case, why did Gaia, choose the Battle of Cliff Mountain as the most representative battle of the entire Song dynasty. There is no other reason than this battle was related to the inheritance of the Chinese civilization. The Battle of Cliff Mountain, also known as the Battle of Cliff Mountain, it was a large-scale naval battle between the Song dynasty and the Mongolian army on Cliff Mountain in 1279 AD. It was also a rare naval battle in ancient China, as this battle was directly related to the survival of the southern Song dynasty. It was also the decisive battle between the Song dynasty and the Yuan dynasty. The outcome of the battle was that the Yuan dynasty won, and the Song dynasty was completely destroyed. When the southern Song dynasty was destroyed, the Prime Minister Liu Xiufu carried the young Emperor Zhao Kuang and committed suicide by jumping into the sea. Many loyal officials followed him, and 100,000 soldiers and civilians jumped into the sea to die for the country. After this battle, the Zhao Song dynasty fell completely. At the same time, it also meant that the remaining forces of the southern Song dynasty were completely destroyed. The Yuan dynasty and the Yuan dynasty finally unified the whole of China. Since then, China was completely conquered by the nomadic tribes in the north for the first time. The fall of the southern Song dynasty was definitely not a simple change of dynasty. It was a fall of the country, marking the end of the classical era of China. Some people thought that this naval battle marked the decline and fall of the classical Chinese civilization. There was a saying, after Cliff Mountain, there was no China. The Battle of Cliff Mountain caused a break in the Chinese civilization that had been passed down for thousands of years. It had a far-reaching impact and lasted until today. The form of civilization in the Ming and Qing dynasties was very different from before. The fall of the Song dynasty also caused China's attempt to change from an agricultural empire to a commercial society to a bubble. It was because the Song dynasty tried to give up the centralized form of an agricultural empire that it continued to be weak militarily. With the fall of the southern Song dynasty, the independent development of China was interrupted. The once highly developed economy, culture, technology, the bureaucratic system that combined the imperial examination with the aristocratic families, the limited imperial power, and the advanced political system were all interrupted. The Yuan dynasty, ruled by the backward Mongols, began to implement a closed, conservative system that focused on light industry and commerce and concentrated more power. The Confucianism of Cheng and Zhu became the main content of the imperial examination and the official ideology of the government. The Ming dynasty, which overthrew the Mongols and established the Mongols, took a conservative and closed path. With such a far-reaching impact, the Battle of Cliff Mountain was destined to be recorded in the annals of history. It was not difficult to understand why Gaia chose to play out this battle. Similarly, the so-called Battle of Cliff Mountain could not bear the elements of an epic battle. Presumably, Gaia would consider it. Perhaps, the Battle of Cliff Mountain in the game would be a reenactment of the Great War. As for the specifics, it would only be known after the battle began. Before that, it had already caused a certain amount of confusion for Ouyang Shuo and the other feudal lords, including the choice of faction and army. In other words, would Gaia set the opposing faction in this battle? Or would it be the same as the Battle of Mabe in the Western Han Dynasty, placing all the feudal lords in the same faction? Would the main battlefield be on land, or would it be a naval battle like in history? These uncertainties meant that this would be a very interesting battle. Chapter 1025. In the blink of an eye, it was the 19th of May. The Battle of Cliff Mountain had officially begun. Because he couldn't figure out the sequence of events of the battle on Cliff Mountain, Ouyang Shuo chose the Royal Navy, the only mixed infantry and cavalry division of the Imperial Guards, the 4th Legion, and the 3,000 Divine Guards. Compared to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Corps of the Imperial Guards, who had gone through a series of bitter battles, the 4th Corps of the Imperial Guards followed by Qi to Hanoi in the Battle of Annam. In the process, there were not many casualties. In fact, they did not even have to fight fiercely before the entire battle ended. Coupled with the fact that the 4th Imperial Guard Corps was a mix of infantry and cavalry, it had greater adaptability, so it was fortunate that it was chosen by Ouyang Shaw to follow him on this expedition. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the system announcement rang. System announcement. In the year 1279, the Ming Yuan Empire's army went south to destroy the Song dynasty. After capturing the southern Song dynasty's capital, they continued south to wipe out the remaining resistance forces of the southern Song dynasty. Both sides fought at Cliff Mountain, ending with the complete destruction of the southern Song dynasty. The ninth epic battle, the Battle of Cliff Mountain, officially begins. Checking the conditions for participating in the battle, assigning the participating troops, system notification. In the Battle of Cliff Mountain, the Inhuman Army has chosen to join the Southern Song Army. No need to choose. Ouyang Shual was silent. He was already mentally prepared for this. System notice. Teleportation has begun. After experiencing a short period of dizziness, Ouyang Shual and the others appeared on the battlefield. System notice. Welcome player not wearing clothes to the Southern Song faction headquarters. Linen. Ouyang Shual was instantly dumbfounded. How could it be linen? Lin, and had already fallen during the Battle of Cliff Mountain. What did Gaia do in this battle? In next to no time, Ouyang Shual had an answer. Right at this moment, a battle announcement sounded. Battle announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain is a time-limited battle to defend the city. It has nothing to do with the real history. The Inhumans must defend Lin, and for a month under the attack of the Mongolian army. Then, they will be judged to have won the battle, and they will be rewarded handsomely. If Lin falls, it will be judged as a failure in the battle, and all battle contribution points will be cancelled. Ruthless enough, Gaia was forcing them, the overlords, into a dead end. They could only win, not lose. If they failed, not only would they not receive any rewards, but they would not even receive any contribution points. Naturally, the soldiers who died on the map would not be able to be resurrected. What made Ouyang Shaw even more depressed was that since it was a time-limited defensive battle, the royal fleet that he had brought with him had come here for nothing. They could only stay in the nearby waters and do nothing. Ouyang Shaw temporarily suppressed his thoughts and looked around. He found that the place where they appeared was not in the military camp outside the city, like in the previous battle, but directly in Lin and city. Did this mean that the Mongolian army had already reached the city? In history, Lin surrendered without a fight. Battle announcement. 6 lords participated in the Battle of Cliff Mountain, with a total of 400,000 troops. According to the results of the nobility and merit test, the mutants in the Southern Song camp are represented by Wei Yu Wui and Wang Ju. Because there was only one faction, the Mountain and Sea Alliance and Yanhuang Alliance were going to fight alongside each other. In terms of military strength, Ouyang Shuo and Di Chun each led 100,000 soldiers, while Feng Xiuhuang, Lord Chunshin, Xiongba, and Wolf Warrior each led 50,000 soldiers. In terms of military strength, Yanhuang Alliance still held the advantage. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo was the representative of the mutants, so he had the upper hand. Compared to the Ungshi rebellion not long ago, the lords participating in the war were much more deserted without Army Kill Ripper and Wandering Soul. If there were no surprises, there would only be 2 or 3 lords left in the next war. The effect of the war on the lords was rapidly weakening. The main purpose of the war was to draw out one dynasty after another, speeding up the process of history and completing the layout of the entire history. The 2 sides in the Battle of Cliff Mountain were the Southern Song dynasty and the Mongol Yuan dynasty. It was unknown if Gaia would add the Yuan dynasty into the history of the wilderness after the war, or would they add the Yuan dynasty in the next war. If it was the former, then the only battles left in China would be the Ming and Qing dynasties. After every battle, there would be one less battle. 5,000 years of history would soon come to an end. During the registration, Ouyang Shuo saw Di Chun and the others. In the Battle of West Chu, Ouyang Shuo had cheated Yanhuang Alliance twice. Di Chun hated Ouyang Shuo to the core. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Although they were in the same faction, Di Chun did not have a good expression. Seeing that Di Chun and the others had an unfriendly expression, Feng Xiuhuang walked over and stood behind Ouyang Shua. Although Yan Huang Alliance had 100,000 more soldiers than them, Feng Xiuhuang was not afraid. Beside Feng Xiuhuang was the famous general of Tang Dynasty, Guizi. The two sides were silently facing each other, and the atmosphere was a little heavy. Ouyang Shua had no intention to argue and was about to leave. At this moment, Xiongba suddenly spoke. "Brother Ouyang, how have you been?" No matter what, they had to fight side by side this time. As an ambitious person, Xiongba was quite pragmatic. He did not want their relationship to be so stiff that it would affect the next war. Furthermore, Ouyang Shuo was the representative of the mutants. Without Ouyang Shuo's message, Yan Huang Alliance would have a harder time in this war. Just like Great Xia, Handan City, Blood Red City, and Hejimen City had more or less brought some navy over, but they were all useless. The war had not even started, and the Southern Song's camp had already lost more than 60,000 mutants. The more it was like this, the more they had to cooperate. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo cupped his fists and greeted Xiongba. He also did not want to have any internal strife in the war map. That would be too unstylish. Seeing this, Xiongba's smile became wider. He was obviously happy that Ouyang Shuo was giving him face. He purposely teased, "Brother Ouyang is not kind. You were plucking peaches from West Chu, but you even stole the beauty Yuji away." This was the brilliance of Xiongba. The War of West Chu was the crux of both sides. Xiongba took the initiative to mention it, not because he wanted to expose Di Chen's scars, but because he wanted to let this matter go and not only affect the cooperation between both sides. Purposely not mentioning it meant that he was very concerned about it. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo looked at Xiongba with admiration, and a smile finally appeared on his face. "Then there's no other way. Great Xia is Yuji's maiden home." Hearing this, Di Chun and the others were speechless. They had never seen such a shameless person. Even if he wanted to find an excuse, he should find a more reliable one. What maiden home? That's pure nonsense. Fortunately, with Xiongba's teasing, the relationship between both sides was finally broken. Di Chun and the others no longer had a deadpan expression. They warmly greeted Ouyang Shuo and Feng Xiuhuang. Of course, that was as far as they could go. It was impossible for both sides to cooperate sincerely. Not to mention on the battle map. Even in the country war in June, the Yan Huang Alliance wouldn't listen to Ouyang Shuo, the leader of the country war, as he wished. The best situation would be for both sides to fight on their own. Ouyang Shuo did not want to stay for long. He said to Xiongba, "The current situation is unclear. After I see the Song Emperor and understand the situation, I would like to invite Brother Xiongba to my humble abode to discuss how to defend the city." "I will do as you say." Xiongba was overjoyed. Wasn't this what he wanted to say? The place where the mutated army landed was originally a small military camp in the west of Linen City. It was one of the bases of the Southern Song Imperial Army. After Gaia's renovation, it became a super military camp that could accommodate 400,000 to 500,000 soldiers. After settling the troops, Ouyang Shuo led his personal guards to the palace under the guidance of a Southern Song soldier in the military camp to see the Southern Song Emperor. In history, the Song Emperor, Zhao Xian, was in charge of Linen City. However, after Ouyang Shuo inquired about it, he found out that Gaia had reversed history. It was completely different from the real history. The person in charge of Linen City now was the last Southern Song Emperor, Zhao Kuang, who was carried into the sea by Prime Minister Lu Xiufu during the Battle of Cliff Mountain. He was only 8 years old. Zhao Kuang was assisted by the famous three heroes of the late Song dynasty, Lu Xiufu, Zhang Shiji, and Wen Tianxiang. In addition, there were 100,000 Song soldiers stationed in Linen City. They were the last military force of the Southern Song dynasty. It seemed that defending the city was not a difficult task. However, Ouyang Shuo did not dare to take it lightly. Since the defenders had changed, the attacking force must be different. Gaia would not let them complete the task easily. The palace, the hall of diligent government. How can a mutated man be without clothes? Greetings, your majesty. Under the guidance of a eunuch, Ouyang Shua finally met Zhao Kuang. The 8-year-old emperor tried his best to put on a dignified appearance. However, his eyes revealed fear and uneasiness. Especially in front of Ouyang Shua, a true emperor, Zhao Kuang was at a loss. Clearly, it was impossible to rely on the young emperor to make decisions. In Linen City, the real masters were the 3 heroes of the late Song dynasty. Among the 3 heroes, Lu Xiufu was a civil official, while Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang were military generals. In the history of the Battle of Cliff Mountain, the 3 of them had different encounters. Needless to say, Lu Xiufu was defeated at Cliff Mountain. After driving his wife and children into the sea, he carried the young emperor to his death at the age of 44. In the Battle of Cliff Mountain, the Southern Song dynasty's towering general, Zhang Shiji, had the thought of where there's life, there's hope. He led his troops to break out of the encirclement. Along the way, they encountered a storm and unfortunately drowned in the storm. The one who grieved the most was Wen Tianxiang. Before the Battle of Cliff Mountain began, Wen Tianxiang was defeated and captured. He was escorted to Cliff Mountain by the Mongolian general, Zhang Hongfan, who asked Wen Tianxiang to write a letter to summon Zhang Shiji. On the Mongolian warship, Wen Tianxiang saw the tragic scene of the Song army being defeated by the Yuan army. He felt like his heart was being cut by a knife. He hated his son for not living up to his expectations, causing such a defeat and the destruction of the dynasty. It was at that time that Wen Tianxiang wrote the famous crossing the Zero Ocean. Once hardships arise, weapons fall around the stars. Mountains and rivers are broken. Wind blows. Life floats in the rain. Fear on the beach says fear. Alone in the Zero Ocean sighs. Who hasn't died since ancient times, leaving a loyal heart to shine in history? After the Battle of Cliff Mountain, Wen Tianxiang was escorted to Yanjing. Kublai tried many times to persuade him to surrender, but he failed. In the end, he died a martyr at the age of 47. Wen Tianxiang left these words in his belt. Confucius said to die for a righteous cause. Mencius said to take righteousness. Only when righteousness is done can one be benevolent. What have I learned from the books of sages? I have no regrets now. Looking at the 3 heroes of the late Song dynasty standing in the court, Ouyang Shua was full of emotions. Chapter 1026. After they greeted each other, Zhang Shiji explained the situation of the Mongolian army outside the city to Ouyang Shua. The more Ouyang Shua listened, the darker his face became. Gaia is up to something. In history, the main general of the Meng Yuan Empire's attack on the Southern Song dynasty was Boyan, and in the Battle of Cliff Mountain, it was Zhang Hongfan. Speaking of Zhang Hongfan, he was also a controversial figure. Zhang Hongfan's father, Zhang Rou, was a Han who lived in the Jin kingdom. Moreover, he was a local tyrant who fought against the Mongolian army at the Wolf-Tooth Ridge. He was defeated and captured, and surrendered to the Mongolians. Zhang Hongfan was born when Zhang Rou was 49 years old. At that time, the Jin kingdom had already been destroyed for 4 years. In other words, Zhang Hongfan was born and raised under the rule of the Mongols. Based on this background, it was understandable that Zhang Hongfan became an official in the Meng Yuan Empire. However, Zhang Hongfan was the main general of the Mongolian army at the Battle of Cliff Mountain and was considered the main culprit behind the destruction of the Southern Song dynasty. Because of Zhang Hongfan's Han blood, he was naturally nailed to the pillar of shame in history. Because the Battle of Cliff Mountain had split the Chinese civilization, Ouyang Shua did not have a good impression of Zhang Hongfan. If they met on the battlefield, he would definitely kill him. In the battle map, apart from Boyan and Zhang Hongfan, even the Mongolian Yuan Empire's big boss, Kublai, was here. This was completely different from history. What kind of person was Kublai? The last Khan of Mongolia was also the founding emperor of the Yuan dynasty. Speaking of this, he had to briefly go through the history of the Khans of the great Mongolian Empire and the changes from the Great Mongolian Empire to the Yuan dynasty. After the death of Genghis Khan Temujin, his third son, Ogdi, who was better at governing the country, succeeded to the throne. His fourth son, Talyui, who was good at war, was in charge of more than 80% of the Mongolian army. This arrangement of Temujin's laid the groundwork for the future division of Mongolia. During Ogdi's reign, in order to eliminate hidden dangers, he secretly poisoned and killed his fourth brother, Talyui. After Ogdi's death, his eldest son, Guiyu, succeeded to the throne. Unfortunately, Guiyu failed to live up to expectations and died after only 3 years on the throne. Tuale's eldest son, Monk, took advantage of the situation and seized the throne of Ogdi. From then on, the throne of the great Mongol Empire was in the hands of the Tole clan until the fall of the Yuan dynasty. Monk was a great figure and was called the Whip of God by the Europeans. During his reign, he launched the Third Mongolian expedition to the west and opened up more territory than his grandfather Genghis Khan. Unfortunately, Brother Monk was also unlucky. When he and his fourth brother, Kublai, attacked the southern Song dynasty, they were defeated in the fishing town. His sudden death not only triggered a 5-year battle between Kublai and Brother Ali for the throne, but also forced the Third Mongolian expedition to the west to stop. At that time, the western expedition led by Su Liuwu had already reached the Mediterranean Sea and was preparing to attack Egypt. If Mongo had not suddenly died at that time, the history of the entire world would have changed because of this. The history of Europe as a whole would be very different. The reason why Kublai was able to become the final victor in the war for the throne was because of the influence of Confucian culture, which indirectly gave birth to the Yuan dynasty. This siege was personally led by Kublai, and it would definitely be a bloody battle. Including the Southern Song Imperial Army, the Southern Song dynasty had a total of 460,000 soldiers. But this time, the Mongolian army had 1 million soldiers, and this did not include the puppet soldiers and the prisoners of war. Of course, such a large army could not be stationed outside the city. With Linen as the center, the Mongolians set up frontline camps in the 6 surrounding cities and surrounded Linen. Other than Linen, the entire world was already occupied by the Mongolians. They had enough food to feed the 1 million soldiers. Linen was more troublesome. According to Liu Xiufu's calculations, including the mutants, no matter how much they tried to save, the food in the city would only last them for 20 days. After 20 days, they would have to think of other ways. There were many famous battles in history. The reason why the defending troops could last for months was not because of the amount of food in the city, but because they had to find other sources of food. Were they? It might be a little shocking to say it out loud. When there was a lack of food in the city, the first to suffer was the war horses. Since they could not charge out, the war horses became dried fruits for the defending troops. When the horses finished eating, they became leather armor. That's right, leather armor. The soldiers cut the leather armor into strips and cooked them in a pot. They could barely be eaten. Because leather armor was made from animal skin, it could barely be considered as a kind of food. Other than leather armor, belts, boots, and even bowstrings, all weapons and equipment made from organic matter were turned into food. What if they finished eating the leather armor? Then they could only eat people. First the old and sick, then the common people. In short, when the defending troops were in a desperate situation, there was nothing they could not eat. Benevolence, righteousness, morality, and humanity were all thrown aside. In China's history, eating people was not a rare thing. When it came to the Battle of Linen, Gaia was a little too much. On the surface, the mission was to defend for a month, but the food in the city could not last for a month. This was a paradox. The only way was to attack instead of defend, take the initiative to go out and search for food. In this way, the battle was even more difficult. What gave Ouyang Shua a headache was that from the words of Liu Xiufu and the other 2 people, although the mutant army had an absolute advantage in military strength, they did not want to give up their command. At the very least, the 100,000 imperial soldiers of the Southern Song dynasty would not be under Ouyang Shua's command. If Lu Xiufu and the other two people did not cooperate, Ouyang Shuo would also have a headache. Of course, he could learn from the Ensure rebellion to have a palace coup and take over the power of life and death in Linen. If he really did that, the situation would become even worse. The palace coup was successful in Chong, and because there was not only Emperor Li Longji in Chong'an, but also Crown Prince Li Xiang, who was pregnant with evil intentions, and more than a dozen princes. But what did Linen have? Except for the 8-year-old Zhao Kuang, there was no one else in the Zhao royal family. If Ouyang Shuo really wanted to be the regent, he might not be able to do anything if he offended Lu Xiufu and the other two ministers. The most basic things, such as appeasing the people, recruiting labor, and collecting food, could not be done smoothly without the help of civil officials. This was a military map. Ouyang Shuo did not bring civil officials with him. Even if he did, it was estimated that it would be useless. What could they do in a short month? The specific things were done by low-level officials. In short, without the cooperation of Lu Xiufu and the other two people, the Battle of Lin was basically hopeless. Ouyang Shuo thought about it and could only pinch his nose and agree. As long as Lu Xiufu and the other two people did not make any excessive demands, Ouyang Shuo would try his best to do what he could. Fortunately, everyone's interests were the same, and there was a basis for cooperation. After testing each other, Lu Xiufu proposed to set up a temporary military office as the highest command organization in the Battle of Lin and taking over all military and political affairs in Lin. Lu Xiufu, Zhang Shiji, and Wen Tianxiang were naturally members of the military office. Ouyang Shuo, as the representative of the mutant army, was also allowed to enter the military office. Otherwise, there was no need to set up the military office. Seeing Ouyang Shuo so cooperative, Lu Xiufu naturally knew how to return the favor and allowed another lord and two generals to enter the military office to discuss important matters. Ouyang Shuo felt a little relieved. After thinking for a while, Ouyang Shuo decided on Xiongba as the lord. Ouyang Shuo could certainly pull Feng Xiuhuang into the military office to increase his right to speak in the military office, but what was the point of that? It was impossible for the Battle of Lin, and without the participation of the Yanhuang alliance. As for why it was Xiongba and not Di Chun who had become the head of the Yanhuang alliance again, the reason was not complicated. It was just that Ouyang Shuo could not stand it. One regarded him as an enemy, and the other took the initiative to express goodwill. It was not obvious who to choose. Ouyang Shuo had to think hard about the choice of the generals. Among the 100,000 troops of Great Xia, the royal fleet led by Zhou Yu was not in Lin at all, and Lu Bu, the third commander of the Imperial Guards, was not a piece of material. As for Su Chu, the general of the Divine Martial Guards, he was the same as Lu Bu. However, Jia Su, the strategist who followed the army this time, was a good candidate. During the Ensure rebellion, Ouyang Shuo brought Pang Tong, which was to take care of Pang Tong. In the end, in terms of military strategy, Ouyang Shuo still preferred the poison warrior Jia Su. However, Jia Su was a strategist, so he could not enter the Grand Council. Ouyang Shuo could only settle for the next best thing. He first put Guozi, who came with Feng Xiuhuang, into the Grand Council and left the other general to the Yanhuang alliance for them to decide. After sitting in the position of Emperor Xia for a long time, Ouyang Shuo became more open-minded. He would not be petty and deliberately make things difficult for the Yanhuang alliance. If he really made things difficult, it would be on the battlefield in the wilderness. There was no need to be calculative on the military map. If he really did that, not only would Di Chun and the others look down on him, but it would also lower his moral character. It was not worth it. After the discussion, Ouyang Shuo took his leave. During the whole process, the little Emperor Zhao Kuang sat on the dragon throne without saying a word. It was like he was a puppet. After returning to the military camp from the palace, Ouyang Shuo immediately met with Xiongba. He told him about the information he obtained and the establishment of the temporary Grand Council. After listening, Xiongba was impressed and said, "Xiongba admires brother Ouyang's breadth of mind. Don't worry, after I come down, I will coordinate the alliance army and fully cooperate with the command of the Grand Council. Then I will have to trouble you. Ouyang Shuo smiled and cupped his fist. Then, Xiongba took the initiative to talk about the situation. When Ouyang Shuo was in the palace, Xiongba and the others did not just wait. They brought people around Lin and to understand the situation. It was not optimistic either. The most worrying thing was that the people in the city were not stable. Why? Because the Mongolian army had a tradition that was enough to scare the common people. During the siege, the defending side only needed to put up a little resistance. After the city was breached, the Mongolian army would massacre the city. Whether it was the Western expedition or the Southern expedition, it was the same. After the massacre, the Mongolian army would throw the corpses into the waterways. Millions of corpses would be thrown into the Yangtze River or its tributaries. The corpses would be thrown into the wells to completely pollute the underground water. The Mongolians would also leave hundreds of people who witnessed the massacre and send them to the cities downstream to spread terror. Before besieging Lin, and the Mongolian army had already massacred several cities. As such, how could the people not be afraid? Ouyang Shuo thought for a while and suddenly said, "To appease the people, I have a good idea." Chapter 10:27. What is it? Xiongba asked. Ouyang Shuo smiled, but didn't say anything. He didn't mention it anymore. Seeing this, Xiongba stopped asking and said, "Other than the instability of the people's hearts, there is another problem. There are many Mongolian spies in Linen. It will be hard for our arrangements to go undetected. Since ancient times, there had never been a lack of traitors in times of national crisis. The Mongolians had surrounded Lin, and with a domineering aura. It was hard to guarantee that the nobles in the city would not have other thoughts. For the continuation of their families, or for wealth, they would secretly become the Mongolians' dogs, especially the aristocratic families. To them, they could destroy their country, but not their families. For the continuation of their families, they would do anything. In history, the Southern Song dynasty surrendered without a fight at the Battle of Lenin. Moreover, this time, Kublai was personally leading the army. There is nothing we can do about it. Ouyang Shuo smiled bitterly and shook his head. After all, we are outsiders. It is impossible to eliminate the Mongolian spies. We can only strengthen our defenses. Ouyang Shuo did not have any expectations for the Southern Song dynasty. If they really carried out a purge, not only would it cause panic and affect their preparations for war, it could also alert the enemy and make the traitors hide even deeper. It was not worth it. Xiongba nodded in agreement. After leaving Ouyang Shuo's tent, Xiongba did not return to his own tent, but went to Di Chen's. Not only Di Chen, but Wolf Warrior, Lord Chunshen, and the others were also there. After hearing Xiongba's report, Di Chen and the others had different expressions. Lord Chunshen said in a strange tone, "Xiongba, you really know how to behave. You become friends with the old fox so quickly." Even Di Chen's heart sank when he heard that Xiongba had been selected to join the Grand Council. Xiongba saw this and smiled disdainfully. "Brother Ouyang, you treat me with sincerity. Of course I don't care about you." He even scolded Lord Chunshen. Lord Chunshen was someone who cared a lot about his face. How could he endure Xiongba's sharp words? He said sarcastically, "Ah, this is new. The old fox has thrown out a bone, and someone calls him brother. Does he even know his own surname?" "You." Xiongba was extremely domineering. He could not stand Lord Chunshen's face. When Zhanlang saw this, no matter what he thought in his heart, he still stood out to be the peacemaker in the end. "You guys stop arguing. There's no need for people to laugh at you. Now, let's discuss which general will be appointed to the Grand Council." For the Battle of Cliff Mountain, Di Chun brought Lien Pe, Xiongba brought Wu Qi, and Zhanlang brought Zhao Zhuan. They were all famous generals under their command. Only Lord Chunshen did not bring Tiandan. He only brought an ordinary general. In terms of ability, Wu Qi was naturally the one to enter the Grand Council. However, Xiongba was already at the Grand Council. If Wu Qi went there as well, things would get interesting. Fortunately, Xiongba was aware of the situation and didn't want to really make things difficult for Di Chen. He took the initiative and said, "No need to discuss. Lian Pe is the best choice. The old general has a lot of experience and prestige." Seeing this, Di Chen's expression softened a little, and he nodded in agreement. On the way back, Zhang Lang unconsciously shook his head. During the discussion just now, Zhang Lang clearly felt a sense of desolation. In less than 5 years, the once lively and glorious Yan-Huang alliance had been gradually disintegrated by Ouyang Shuo. It was really a good move. Although Yan-Huang alliance already had countermeasures, but if either Lord Chunshun or Xiongba were to fall, then Yan-Huang alliance's future situation would be extremely delicate. In contrast, the movements of the factions were too slow. "I don't know what the old man is thinking." Zhang Lang quietly sighed. Long-term disguise made Zhang Lang very depressed. This was not his style of doing things. The next morning, the Grand Council in the city held its first collective discussion. This discussion was mainly to decide on the defense areas of each department. Lin's city was surrounded by 4 walls and had 12 gates of various sizes. Which troops guarded which section had to be coordinated beforehand. It was impossible to let all 340,000 mutant soldiers squeeze into one military camp. That was not realistic. The defending troops in the city could be divided into 3 major factions. The Southern Song Army was one faction, led by the 3 heroes of the late Song dynasty. Yan-Huang Alliance formed its own faction, which was also the strongest faction. Ouyang Shuo and Feng Qiuhuang formed a faction. In view of the abnormal strength of the Great Xia Imperial Guards, they also could not be underestimated. Originally, the 100,000 Great Song Imperial Guards were the weakest faction. In front of the Mongolian army, it was still unknown how much strength the Great Song Imperial Guards could display. As for the 2 main generals, Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang, if it was not for Ouyang Shuo ridiculing them, if it was not for the special historical period of the late Song dynasty, the 2 of them would not even be ranked in the top 100 in the ranking of ancient generals in China. As for Wen Tianxiang, he was mainly known for his national integrity. It was not good to comment on his true commanding ability. In the Battle of Cliff Mountain, Zhang Shiji made a series of stupid moves, allowing Zhang Hongfan to easily win the battle. Although the 3 heroes of the late Song dynasty were tragic, but when the tragic appearance was removed, it was the cruel reality. As the saying goes, the times make the heroes. However, Lin was the main battlefield of the Song army. They had the advantage of time, place, and manpower, and could barely contend with the other 2 factions. The 3 factions were like 3 legs of a tripod, and none of them could do anything to the other. The Grand Council was the result of a compromise between the 3 factions. The only thing that was disadvantageous to the mutant army was that apart from the 60,000 navy that they had no use for, the Mountain and Sea Alliance and the Yellow Emperor Alliance had brought more than half of their cavalry, which was very disadvantageous to defending the city. This was something that could not be helped. Before the battle began, everyone thought that they were going to fight the Mongolian army head-on, and bringing cavalry was always the right choice. Who knew that Gaia would do such a thing? On the contrary, the 100,000 Great Song Imperial Guards were basically infantrymen. The outside world had a misunderstanding of the Southern Song dynasty. They thought that the Southern Song dynasty was content with being bullied by the Jin Kingdom or the Mongolian Kingdom. They were always acting like a coward, and from time to time, they would cede territory and pay reparations. Such an army of the Southern Song dynasty must be very weak. In reality, that was not the case. In that special period of history, the Mongolian cavalry was an extraordinary existence. Not only did they destroy the powerful Jin Kingdom, but they also destroyed Xixia, Dali, and even started a massacre in Eurasia. During that period of time, no army or country in the world could stop the Mongolian cavalry, except for the Southern Song dynasty. The Southern Song dynasty was not only the last country to be conquered by the Mongolian army, but it was also the country that caused the most trouble for the Mongolians. Even the great ruler, Munt Khan, died while attacking the Southern Song dynasty. To be able to survive for more than 150 years under the continuous attacks of the Jin Kingdom and the Mongolian Kingdom, it would be unreasonable to say that the Southern Song dynasty was weak. The greatest tragedy of the Southern Song dynasty was that it lived in a terrible era. First, it was the powerful Jin Kingdom, and then the even more powerful Mongolian Kingdom. How could it not be defeated when world-class enemies came south? Although the Southern Song dynasty did not achieve much in terms of offense, in terms of defense, the Southern Song dynasty's army was definitely the most advanced in the world. Not to mention other things, the defensive weapons of the Southern Song dynasty, including the bed crossbow, were the best in the world. This was especially so for the famous 3-bow, 8-bull bed crossbow. It was so technologically advanced that other countries could not even hope to match it. Therefore, in this battle, if the 100,000 Imperial Guards could raise their morale and get rid of the psychological trauma of fighting against the Mongolian army, they would definitely be able to achieve great things. This would depend on the abilities of Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang. Because the three powers were all at ease, Ouyang Shaw suggested the following arrangements to prevent each other from hindering each other. The North Wall was guarded by the Great Xia Imperial Guard's 4th Legion and the fallen Phoenix City troops, a total of 120,000 soldiers. Guozi was appointed as the commander of the North Gate, and the valiant General Eli was appointed as the deputy commander. It was reported that Kublai's golden tent was located in the northern suburbs. Therefore, the North Wall was under the most pressure. Ouyang Shua had taken the initiative to take over, which was the most benevolent act. The South Wall was guarded by 100,000 Imperial Guards, with Zhang Shiji as the commander and Wen Tianxiang as the deputy commander. The East and West Walls were guarded by 210,000 soldiers from the Yan-Huang alliance. The specific arrangements were, Di Chun and Lord Chunshin would lead troops to guard the West Wall, with Lien Pe as the commander. Xiong Ba and Zhan Lang would lead troops to guard the East Wall, with Wu Qi as the commander. In order to reconcile the forces on both sides, Lord Chunshin's troops will be split into two to the East and West Walls. Above the four commanders was the Grand Council, which was responsible for unified command. With Ouyang Shua's suggestion, the strategist Jia Su was allowed to enter the Grand Council to oversee military affairs. Of course, Jia Su only had the right to make suggestions, but not the right to make decisions. As such, the entire command structure was established. After the discussions were completed, the armies began to move, pulling out their camps and changing their defenses. The four commanders were responsible for the specific arrangements for the defense of the four walls. Take the North Wall as an example. Guozi planned to set up a command post near the North Gate. Within 500 meters of the North Wall, all residences, shops, and other buildings would be commandeered by the army. These buildings would either be demolished, converted into warehouses, medical rooms, or expanded into barracks. Every 500 meters, there would be a central barracks with 10,000 soldiers stationed there. Only in this way could 120,000 soldiers be accommodated. The other three sides basically followed this kind of resettlement plan. Therefore, before the war, there needed to be a large-scale demolition operation in Linen. This matter was naturally Lu Xiufu's responsibility. Demolition was never easy, not to mention a large-scale demolition. It all depended on how Lu Xiufu arranged it. In addition to the demolition, the Grand Council would organize the Ministry of Revenue, Ministry of Works, and Ministry of War to connect with the four commanders to discuss matters such as the allocation of rations and labor. In view of the instability of the hearts of the people in Lin, and when the war began, there might be monsters and demons causing trouble. In addition to the city walls, the area under the jurisdiction of the four armies also included the city districts. In addition to guarding the city gates, the four armies also shouldered another mission, which was to be responsible for the security of their respective districts. In Linen, the people's hearts were unstable, and the bailiffs alone were not enough. At the critical moment, the army had to be deployed. When everything was settled, it was already the 5th day of the war. During this period, there was a small wave. It was none other than the riots caused by the demolition. Chapter 1028. Lu Xiufu had been having a headache ever since he took on the job of the demolition office. It was human nature for the common people to care about their homes. Even during the war, it was very difficult for them to move out of the house that they had lived in for their entire lives. After the meeting, Lu Xiufu posted a notice to announce the demolition. Due to the continuous years of war, the people were homeless, and there were heavy casualties. Even the capital, Linen, was already empty. Therefore, the people who moved away did not have to worry about finding a place to stay. Even then, there were only a few who were truly willing to move away obediently, and this caused Lu Xiufu to be badly battered. Demolition and relocation was the first step in settling down the city guards, so it had to be done as soon as possible. Ouyang Shuo received the news and immediately gave Lu Xiufu 2 suggestions. First, he told the citizens who lived near the city walls that the Mongolian army had brought a large number of return cannons this time, and they could fire their cannons into the city walls. If he didn't want to be caught in the crossfire, he'd better move obediently. The Mongolians brought back quite a number of outstanding craftsmen from the Middle East during their 3 expeditions to the west, and to a certain degree, they promoted the upgrading of Mongolian weapons and equipment. The return cannon was one of the best among them. The return cannon, also known as the Western Region Cannon or Xianyang Cannon, was a new type of catapult. This kind of trebuchet was created by 2 Muslims who believed in Islam. They improved on the basis of the ancient trebuchet, innovated and improved it to be more advanced and powerful. In the Battle of Xianyang during the Song and Yuan dynasties, the Huihui cannon showed its prowess and broke through the thick walls of Xianyang city in one fell swoop. It contributed greatly to the Mongolian army's capture of Xianyang city, hence the name Xianyang Cannon. Secondly, he would directly deal with the truly stubborn ones and use the military to forcefully demolish them, showing no mercy. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Lu Xiufu was a civil official, so he liked to do things according to the thinking of civil officials. Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, was a typical realist. He would do whatever was most effective. As expected, after hearing about the power of the returning cannons, the people living near the city walls ran away faster than rabbits. It wasn't just the civilians within the 500-meter radius. Even those outside the 500-meter radius took the initiative to evacuate. This was the herd mentality of the people. After the civilians were evacuated, a large-scale renovation began that lasted for several days. Speaking of which, it was strange. Over the past few days, the Mongolian army outside the city had been very quiet. Just as the troops were changing the guard, a rumor spread out in Linen. They said that the Mongolian army was cruel and merciless, slaughtering the people of the Central Plains, and that the heavens would punish them. Because of this, the Jade Emperor in the heavens sent celestial soldiers and generals to assist the imperial court in fighting against the Mongolian army. Some people who lived near the western barracks vowed that on that day, the sky changed color. Balls of dazzling white light flashed, and 400,000 celestial soldiers and generals appeared out of thin air. Because there were many people who saw this matter, the more it spread, the more exaggerated it became. Even the soldiers in the camp were discussing this matter, speaking with certainty. Furthermore, the armies on the 4 sides had been changing defenses recently. The common people could easily see these troops. Seeing these troops wearing armor that was clearly different from the Song Nation's army, the common people were even more convinced. People gradually began to believe in the theory of heavenly soldiers and generals. At this moment, there was a decree from the imperial court. Ouyang Shuo was conferred the title of King Xia and was ordered to fight against the Mongolian army. Some people said that Emperor Xia was a celestial sent by the Jade Emperor. He could summon the wind and rain and summon the ancient celestial generals, such as Wu Lai and Su Chu. Eli rode the Rakshasa around the city, causing many exclamations. This time, the commoners were convinced. Taoism flourished in the Sui and Tang dynasties, and reached its peak in the Song dynasty. Thus, this rumor had a strong foundation and was easily accepted by the people of Linen. Once they accepted this, their confidence increased. Although the Mongolian army was very scary, no matter how powerful they could not be compared to the celestial soldiers and generals. In just a few days, the people who were in a panic were slightly comforted. All of this was naturally planned by Ouyang Shuo from behind the scenes. When Xiong Ba heard the news, he laughed and shook his head. I didn't expect it to be so simple. Indeed, many things that seemed complicated were actually easier to deal with. The difference was whether one could think differently. On the sixth day of the battle, in the morning, for the past few days, there was no movement from the Mongolian army. This made Ouyang Shuo very uneasy. The four sides of the army had already sent scouts out of the city to investigate. They wanted to find out what the Mongolian army was doing. Ouyang Shuo was accompanied by the general of the North Gate, Guizi. He went up to the North Gate tower and looked into the distance. As far as the eye could see, the outside of the city was densely packed with Mongolian camps. The white yurts were connected to each other, and one could not see the end of them. And this was only the vanguard of the Mongolian army. The real main force was not in the suburbs, but in the city that was further away. 1 million soldiers surrounding a city was a game. It would never happen in reality. Not to mention other things, just the consumption of food and other resources could deplete the whole of Jiangnan in half a year. Nothing would be left, and it would become a wasteland. Obviously, Gaia in the battle map was blurred. General, what do you think the Mongolians are planning? Ouyang Shuo suddenly asked. Guizi was obviously stunned. These few days, he was busy building the Northgate command post and liaising with the Southern Song dynasty. At the same time, he led a team to familiarize himself with the defense facilities in the north. Since Ouyang Shuo asked, Guizi had to answer him. After thinking for a while, Guizi answered, there are only two reasons why the enemy is not attacking the city. Either there is an internal change, or there is something else that they are not ready. In this situation, the possibility of an internal change is very small. The biggest possibility is that they are preparing a trump card. Guizi said his judgment. Then what trump card would it be? Ouyang Shuo looked at the Mongolian camp. It was not known if he was asking Guizi or asking himself. My king, please be at ease. I predict that the scouts will bring back news in these 2 days. By then, everything will be clear. Guizi comforted him. Ouyang Shuo did not express his opinion. I can faintly feel that in a place further away, there's a monstrous resentment that is slowly gathering. I do not know what the Mongolian army is doing. Guizi heard this and his heart trembled. He heard from his lord, Feng Xiaohuang, that Emperor Xia was not only good at politics and martial arts, but his personal cultivation was also amazing. What he cultivated was the highest level of mysterious martial arts. With this feeling, he was not far from the truth. Guizi cupped his fists and said, rest assured, my king, I will tighten my guard. Ouyang Shuo nodded and walked down the city gate tower. He faintly felt that this was the last calm before the storm. A bloody war was about to begin. Ouyang Shuo's premonition was very accurate. On the 7th day of the war, the Mongolian army that had been quiet finally made a move. On this day, the sky had just brightened. Outside of Lin, and hundreds of thousands of Han people suddenly came from all directions. They were dressed in rags, and their bodies were thin. They looked terrified. They were being herded by the Mongolian army towards Lin, and like a flock of sheep. They only stopped when they were a stone's throw away from the city wall. On the South Gate Tower, Zhang Shiji looked at the refugees outside of the city. His face was extremely ugly. I knew that this group of bastards would use this method. Wen Tianxiang, who was beside him, also had a grave expression. He clenched his fists and his eyes were burning. Looking at the situation, Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang seemed to know what the Mongolian army was going to do. The reason why the Mongolian army did not attack the city for the past few days was that they went around to plunder the Han people. They drove them together like cattle and sheep on the grassland and gathered them outside of Lin. What happened next made Ouyang Shuo and the others' eyes almost pop out of their sockets. They saw that these sallow and emaciated people were holding simple tools. Under the supervision of the Mongolian army, they dug the soil on the ground and used the soil to build a fort. During the process, if anyone dared to be lazy or slow, the supervisor's whip would fall mercilessly. These inspectors had grown up on horseback, so their whippings were ruthless. With one lash, the victim's clothes would be torn and his skin would be torn. The Mongolian army's expression made people even angrier. Looking at the situation, they did not treat these people as human beings at all. They beat and scolded them wantonly. They even laughed perversely as they beat them. It seemed that they were enjoying it very much. A group of bastards. The Mongolians regarded the Han people as meat on the chopping board. They had barbarically conquered civilization. It was really infuriating. Seeing their comrades being abused like this, the soldiers guarding the city could not bear to kill them. If they really did that, they would be no different from animals. Just like that, the Mongolians smoothly used the Han people to build forts around the city walls. Looking at the situation, these forts were probably taller than the city walls of Lenin. If these forts were really built, they would become the best outpost for the Mongolian army to attack the city. They were even more useful than moving arrow towers. What made people even more indignant was yet to come. These captured people were already hungry. In the process of building the forts, they could only get a thin porridge every night. They could not even fill their stomachs, let alone eat their fill. How could they support themselves if they did not have enough to eat and had to do heavy work? Since the afternoon, there were people who fainted due to exhaustion. How did the Mongolian supervisor deal with these people who fainted? Not to mention carrying them away for treatment. They did not even have the time to whip them. They just killed them with a sword and threw their bodies into the forts that were being built as building materials. This kind of behavior was truly shocking. On the second day, the behavior of the Mongolians had completely exceeded the category of human. They saw the Mongolians suddenly set up boilers that were as tall as a person in between the forts. Ouyang Shual and the others were confused by what they were doing. What are they doing? Are they lighting a fire to cook? Feng Xiaohuang was puzzled. Ouyang Shual shook his head. He also did not know. Fortunately, the answer was soon revealed. They saw the Mongolian army throwing the living people into the boilers and burning them alive. Their goal was to use the living people to refine corpse oil. The mournful cries of the people in the boilers caused everyone's faces to turn pale. Ugh, seeing the Mongolian soldiers collecting corpse oil from the boilers, Feng Xiaohuang could no longer hold it in and vomited on the spot. Ouyang Shua's expression was extremely unsightly. He stared at the Mongolian army outside the city and said coldly, "These bastards do not deserve to live in this world." This was the first time Ouyang Shua hated a group of people so much. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.